the idea of working for many years was that I am working because I have one purpose, and that purpose is Trivax and to make that music happen, you know. So I'm happy to do whatever I need to do just to keep that thing going. There is a degree of wit to the way we go about criticizing the religion, but also the regime as well. I think the chapter of the Islamic Republic is over, and you know, but what a shame that it is at the cost of thousands of lives that we're taking, you know, because the country will change, the Islamic Republic will fall, but those people who lost their lives on the streets of Iran, all across the country, chanting against the Islamic regime and chanting for Prince Reza Pahlavi, all those people who died, like, we can't bring them back.
I've also been playing with the idea of potentially changing the format of the podcast slightly. So still having full fat episode, but going straight into the interview. And then, so literally like cold open, intro, like 30-second song, straight into the interview. And then afterwards, those that stick around, they get the bonus content. The, you know, they get the news, rant, unsanctioned filth, all that sort of stuff. Because I've seen on my analytics, there's a bit of a dip after that intro, and then it comes back. So clearly what's happening is people are skipping. So if they're skipping it anyway, it's really more of a pain in the ass for me to do the intro than anything else. As long as it doesn't hurt the unsanctioned filth segment. And then the other idea that I've toyed with, and I've kind of floated it to people before, the Legion have not appeared so keen. But the other idea I've had was having, like doing it like Chris Van Fleet does his podcast. So interview on Tuesdays, on a Friday, the news rant and the unsanctioned filth segment. So that's sort of, yeah. So I'm kind of dabbling with a few different ideas. I noticed that video of yours did really, really well. The Why Behemoth Got Banned in Turkey video.
Oh yeah, I think it did quite all right in terms of like.
When I last looked, it was like 2,800 views. That's really solid.
Yeah, no, actually, you know what? You're right. In the context of YouTube, that's good. I've been having an interesting time on Instagram the last month or so. So, you know, 3,000 doesn't seem like a lot, given fucking Boy George was sharing my call-out video on Roger Waters. But
that's a feather in your cap.
It's the most random. It's like the kind of crossovers you never expected. But you know, I mean, fucking hell, even calling out Roger Waters wasn't on my fucking bucket list, and you know, or like any fucking list at this year, but it just happened. But yeah, that video ended up doing quite all right, you know. But the thing is as well, you know, I feel like I've got an sort of a perspective that a lot of people perhaps would appreciate hearing, at least, you know. They don't necessarily have to agree with what I say, but I'm one of the fewer people from that neck of the woods who has these set of experiences, and also even, I guess, I mean even more of a niche category, the fact that I'm into extreme metal and, you know, a total, you know, metal person, and also, you know, have been performing this music for many, many years now, most of my life at this point. And I think that's kind of a unique perspective that, like I said, even if people don't agree with what I have to say, at least they're interested to tune in. By the way, I know that this is your show, and I don't want to dominate the control dynamic here, but Jackie, my man, this is a fucking pleasure to be back on your show. And I've got a message to your fucking audience as well. If you want to hear Walt Jackson and Shayan from Trivax raise some hell, give me a hell yeah! What? What? There we go.
Yeah, dude,
do this, man. I'm stoked. Really happy.
It's great to see you again. Man. The last time that you were on here was it for the Unholy Alliance special that we did? I think it was.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, it might have been. I know you came on Iblis in the second half of last year, I think. Yeah. And yeah, you're right. I mean, we've recorded some stuff in between then that's yet to be released. And by the way, I've got a great suggestion for that off camera. But Yeah, you're right. That was the last time I was on the show, man. Fucking A.
Yeah, no, that's actually way too long. Like, I think there needs to be at least. I mean, I continually get people messaging me saying you and I should do something monthly. Like we should, like they say we should get together and have like a conversation every month. And I've said, yeah, but I mean, I would love to do that, but we're both very busy. The other thing is you do want to keep the novelty value there, and have it be something people will look forward to.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's always a pleasure to talk to you anyway, man.
The phone conversations we have, if we recorded that, we could just present that. There you go. There's another episode.
I was literally about to say the same thing, man. Like we've had phone conversations that went on longer than some of the podcasts, But I think those phone conversations would really hurt people's feelings. But maybe that's what people like. Maybe that's what people tune in for. They like a little bit of spice.
Oh, dude! As I learned recently with the Nick Barker episode.
Yeah, that was a great episode, man. Congratulations on getting that out there.
Oh, thank you. I was not expecting things to blow up to that degree. It was, to me, and I said this when I did the swirly of the week. It was a fairly innocuous question from my perspective. Like, how have people responded? I asked the question, kind of expecting that he was just going to go, yeah, everyone's been great, and then we move on. But when the AI slop starts picking it up and people start getting bent out of shape about it, I mean, that was certainly not my intention. But people do like drama, unfortunately.
This is the thing, man. I was just about to say drama sells. So I noticed there's been a number of episodes that I've done that ended up on Blabbermouth and other various platforms, which, by the way, I'm very grateful to those guys for actually sharing the episodes, and I hope it served them as good articles, I hope the content that I put out there, I mean, I'm just having conversations with interesting people, or at least people that I think are interesting, and having conversations that are interesting to me, and then I'm just kind of like, well, this is cool, so let's share it. Same approach I have to music. There's like riffs that come out of me that I'm like, well, this is fucking cool, this is interesting, so let's share it with everyone. That's kind of my approach to everything I do. But one thing that I noticed is that pretty much like within like 80-90% of those articles, like external articles outside of what I release that get picked up, are usually somewhat drama focused or drama related. And that's because that's the thing that sells, man. That's what people are interested in. It's like, ooh, gossip, let me click on this, and this is, it's a natural part of the human experience. What I will say, to reference specifically that episode that you had with Nick, from a journalistic standpoint, I thought you handled that brilliantly. Because at no point you were saying, okay, yes, I agree with you that, oh yeah, these bands are shit. That's not what you said at all. You just let the man say his piece, and then it's down to people to observe that based on what they're hearing. Now they can say, oh wow, what he's saying, actually, I know information contrary to the fact. Or they can say, wow, he's right. Fuck those bands. I can't believe they never reached out to him. But the thing is, that the point of, I mean, I hate to refer to it as this, but what we are doing essentially is a form of journalism. And the whole point of journalism is that you come and present a piece to someone. It's not an interrogation, as I know you've used that term before. It's not an interrogation. You're just like presenting a certain thing to someone and presenting a conversation. It's like, okay, well, I was talking to so-and-so. Here's what they said. You can literally listen to that person as it is. The episode's not edited. It's not like, you're not taking anything out. You're not taking anything out of context. That's the purpose of long format podcasts, is that you literally get to hear what someone says. So then that's down to people to want to judge that for themselves, and in this case, people sometimes make the wrong assumption that, oh, the person who's doing the interview, or better yet, hosting the show, is somehow automatically taking on the opinions of the guest as well. And that's just simply not true. It's the exact same as when I had Aaron from My Dying Bride on Iblis Manifestations. When I had him on the show, then this was obviously prior to his formal, I guess, departure from My Dying Bride. But even then, I was just asking him questions. I'm like, okay, well, what's happened between you guys? I don't personally know the ins and outs of the band. He's just telling me that, okay, he still actually wants to continue the band. And, and I'm saying, as a fan, I have a hard time imagining My Dying Bride without your vocals on it. Okay. An opinion which I know both you and I share, but that's not like a statement. And then there's people in the comments, very few, but there's always a couple of those kind of specimens out there that are coming and saying that, oh, you're trying to get the band canceled, you're telling people not to support the new lineup, and you're telling them not to go, this is like a legal thing. It's like, bro, I'm having a fucking conversation with like the founding member of the band, and I'm saying I can't imagine the band without him. I'm not telling anyone to do anything. This is a fucking, like, chill the fuck out. People can make up their own minds, and then that's the beauty of these things. You can watch an interview. Two people can watch one interview, and both of them could have different takeaways, or both of them could have a totally different opinion about it. And that's fine. That's how people work. Sometimes it's good to just be respectful of each other's spaces. Understand there's not necessarily a narrative here. We're not fucking paid by anyone. If anything, we fund everything that we do entirely independently. And we do it because it's fun, because we like it, and we're intrigued by different people in these topics. So that's kind of the point that I think is important to reiterate for anyone who tunes into these conversations going forward.
Well, something you were talking earlier about, the having a conversation with somebody that you find interesting. You no doubt know Louis Theroux, or you would have seen a couple of Louis Theroux documentaries. I always loved, especially his earlier stuff. I think it was called Louis Theroux's Weird Weekends. He would go and meet and spend time with the most random people. He went to the power plant, the WCW training center. He spent a couple of weeks with, this avowed Nazi skinhead dude. I can't remember what his name was, but he did an episode with him. He was at the Bunny Ranch in Las Vegas. Was it called the Bunny Ranch? I don't know. Some house of ill repute. But it was what I loved about it is the approach that he took, which was exactly like you just said. Now he kind of steps back, and he doesn't try and create drama. He doesn't try and necessarily create intrigue. He just allows the person to present themselves as they wish to be presented. And like I said, I mentioned this on the Swirly of the Week when I was addressing it. I give people the option. If there's something that you've said that you don't want to let out into the world, if you think it could be career limiting, or you said something about somebody that maybe you think is too harsh in retrospect, I can take it out. I'm not here to make you look bad, and I'm also not here to try and start shit. I mean, if I were particularly enterprising, I would be blowing up somebody from Doomborger's inbox right now. I'd be asking Silenos, do you want to come back on the podcast and address what Nick said? The pro wrestling the pro wrestling fan in me desperately wants to do it, but what would be what purpose would that serve? So I just relay the conversation as it happened. Beyond that, it's if people want to know my opinions on stuff, there's no shortage of that in the news rant.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And this is the beauty of what we do. And by the way, we should point out that usually the people that seem to misunderstand what it is that we're trying to do here are not regular listeners of not just our shows, but they probably don't, because you got to understand, man, as popular and as big as podcasting is, there's still a lot of people out there that don't fucking understand how it works. Like, like every now and then I'll get some, cheese dick on my channel commenting, saying something like, why is the host talking so much? It's like, this is a conversation, bro, and it's like, why is it so long? It's a conversation. Imagine the best way to imagine it, now, like imagine two people talking at a pub over a set of drinks, and it's like, we're just having a conversation like that. It just also happens to be recorded, like to me, even if I didn't release the episodes, I still want to have that conversation, like I still want to talk to the person and be like, hey, what are they about? What can I learn about this? That's why sometimes, I don't know if you have this. I mean, I must give you credit because you put so much effort into supporting the underground, supporting bands, supporting up and coming bands, you know, and this was certainly the case for Trivax exactly 5 years ago, I think, when we did our first episode together. Would you fucking believe it? And you know, like, you've done a great job of that. But to me, like, I sometimes, you know, I get so many PR people like messaging me is like, oh, would you like to review such and such new album, you know, or like, hey, would you like to have so and so on your show? And I'm kind of like, I mean, like, I don't mind talking to people, but it's like, why would I'm not doing this. This is not a PR fucking thing. This is not like, I'm not doing this to like promote albums. I'm doing this because I want to have interesting fucking conversations. So when you know, and I've said this to a few people, you know, and they didn't take it very well, because I guess a lot of PR people just want to make their living and just do their job. But like, if you pitch a DSPM band to me, that's like ideologically the opposite of where I stand on things. Okay. Yeah. I've had to tell a few people, I'm like, if you had actually watched my channel, you would know that I despise nihilism. I see nihilism as weakness. And I think, you know, if you're suicidal and you know, if you're not that if you're suicidal, but rather if you're glorifying suicide, you can go fuck yourself. You know, like, that's like totally doesn't go with my ethos, you know. Like, fair enough, if there's people who've got issues with mental health, things like that, I'd love to talk about that kind of stuff. But when you're coming at it from a perspective of glorifying it, which is what DSPM essentially is, it's just like you're glorifying weakness. And my God, I fucking hate weakness. I really, really detest it. So there's it's important to know that.
I agree with you. There's an element of DSPM to me that it feels like a kind of wallowing that is relatively exclusive to the West. Like, I've met many folks from China, Japan, you know, from all over. I've never seen that kind of self-indulgence and that sort of self-obsession there. But where I have seen an awful lot of it, sadly, is amongst certain quarters of the metal scene in the UK. I saw a bit of it in South Africa. I've seen a lot of it in the US. It to me, in a weird way, you know, those same sort of people are the ones that are more likely to scold you about your privilege, or, you know, use the you know, the buzzword of the day, you know, as far as you know, the culture and social mores are concerned, to chastise you. But they're the ones who are truly indulgent, and they're the ones who are truly indulging in their privilege, because it is a privilege, without a shadow of a doubt. You know, exceptions to the rule. If you have mental health problems, that's a different story. But it is absolutely the self-indulgence and privilege to live a middle-class life, have all the luxuries that living in a you know, first world Western country afford you, and sit there going, I wish I was dead. What's the point of doing anything? I'm going to live off the government, and, you know, that sort of thing to me is just, it's anathema. I can't fucking stand it. Metal to me, and black metal especially, has always been about empowerment. It has never been about surrender. And what that is suicide. Ultimately, for a lot of those people, that's surrender. And the thing is, most of them, I mean, won't ever commit suicide anyway. It's just kind of this energy they give off, but it's a timid, tepid, weak, pathetic energy, and I just can't get on board with it. You will never be able to change my mind in that regard.
Yeah, and we share the same perspective on that. You know, it's a very rich irony that at its core is a symptom of one thing, and that thing is comfort, and accessibility. Yeah. And that's a fucking disaster. It's a problem that we're seeing in the West over and over. And you know, and I'm hoping to, you know, because the thing is, it's not like everything is perfect either. And that, you know, like, I kind of want to draw a distinction here, you know, that there are things that you should be critical about. There are things that you want to fight, but that doesn't mean like completely going against yourself. You know, like, you know, whenever I see some fucking, like, there's this like new fucking trend in black metal, and when I say black metal, I think it's a small portion of it, but when I see them trying to justify their values, because first of all, they don't have values, some of these people, you know, and when they're talking about like, oh, our message of the band is all about, you know, destruction of the flesh or whatever, I'm just like, piss off, you fucking pussy, you know, get the fuck out of here. You know, like if you believe that, start with yourself, get the fuck out of my face, you know, but that's not what it is, you know, it's just trying to create a selling point. But then ultimately, like behind all the smoke and mirrors, what is there? Nothing. There's nothing there. You know, all these people using like, you know, like we were joking about it on one of the episodes, you know, it's like, oh yeah, well done. You read the entire Wikipedia page on clip off, you know, like slow clap. That's basically, you know, like some of these folks that come out and spout this kind of shit. Oh, I'm anti-human. You know, I actually think even in a spiritual occult context, if we really wanted to go there, you know, you cannot truly understand and pursue the left-hand path unless you understand and are fully capable of the opposite of it. Okay. Now, I don't profess to be a traditional left-hand path person anyway. Okay. I am for life. I am, as you know, for life, for friendship, for good times, for success, for ambition, for love, as much as you can get. In fact, I'm very fiercely for that. Okay. I'm quite aggressively working towards that, even though ultimately at its core, it's hopefully a peaceful place. But to me, that's something that's worth fighting for. Now, to come and stand against that as if you are, you know, you're somehow like, you know, this spiritual nihilism, you know, that's just somehow kind of reared its head in especially the context of black metal, you know, but even some like modern punk. I just think that when you look at the people who are behind that, I have no respect for them. The reason why my music is aggressive the way it is, the reason why I am the way that I am, that where you've got that fucking intensity, is because I want things to be better. The reason why I'm as hateful towards a certain specific religion that you already know exactly which one I'm talking about is because I want things to be better, not to give into it. You know, like for example, in Iran, I wouldn't have been able to have a DSPM project because it's like, okay, you know, like the government already is trying to fucking kill me. And I hate those cunts. Why would I make their life easier? I'm not going to make it easy for them. Fuck them. They can, you know, this is a fight. I'm going to keep on going. So to me, you know, like when you have something to fight for, when you realize how valuable and precious it actually is to be on this earth and to actually really utilize it and to understand how lucky you are, the torment of all your ancestors that are in your blood just for you to be here, just for you to sit here in February 2026 and breathe oxygen, have a fully functioning body. You're so fucking lucky, and it would be so stupid to even have a sheer ounce of ingratitude towards that, you know. So that's just kind of where
it's something I often tell my daughter. I say, I'll say to her, you know, if you were born with a healthy body and a healthy mind, right then and there, you've already won the genetic lottery. Now it's up to you to make the most of both. And I think a lot of that privilege and a lot of that that nihilistic behavior that you were referring to, it comes from a place. Or it comes from people who have never experienced what it's like to be without, you know, without a home, without food on your table, without a roof over your head, bed to sleep in, without your health, you know, without, you know, truly without money. It would benefit them greatly to be airdropped over the middle of the Congo, because I can tell you right now, they would have a realization, or they would have a moment of lucidity as far as life is concerned, unlike any other. You remember on Fight Club, there was that scene where he threatens to kill the convenience store clerk unless he goes and he says he's going to, you know, what do you want to do with your life? And he says, I can't remember if he says he wants to be a vet or something. So I'm going to be coming back here in a year from now to make sure that you're studying. And if you're not, you know, I'm going to kill you. And then, you know, the principle of it is he says to Jack, to the unnamed narrator, he says, when he wakes up tomorrow, he's going to have the best day of his entire life. Like, food is never going to have tasted as good. I can't remember the exact dialogue, but the air, will never have been sweeter. But that a lot of people that have that mentality, they would benefit greatly from experiencing what true suffering is, and what a lot of people in the world unfortunately have to accept as their day-to-day life.
Absolutely. And one of the best tools I find in especially today's world, because let's face it, regardless of where you live on the earth, 2026 is a pretty fucking amazing time to be alive. And yes, there's many things that are wrong with the world, and whether you want to look at like the food system, the financial system, how much we're getting fucking taxed like a bunch of communists here in the UK, and then there's things like that you can talk about. But one of the best ways that I find you can give yourself a true reality check is self-imposed difficulty. And I know we've talked about that, but one of the best antidotes, as someone who did previously, I feel like I can remember what it felt like, but I can't relate to it. And part of that is because of chronic self-imposed difficulty, aka discipline. But one of the best things you can do, let's say if you're feeling down and depressed, is go and take a fucking cold shower. Watch what happens. Watch what happens when you're no longer living inside your own head and are simply trying to fight off and fend off the cold that all of a sudden surrounds you. It shocks you. It puts you in your place. It reminds you exactly where you are. And and the same goes for weightlifting and training and all these different things. But that self-imposed difficulty is such a valuable thing, and it's funny, like you want to understand how amazing it is that you actually have a roof over your head. Practice being a homeless person for one day. Okay, just practice it. Okay, go outside, do the thing, and just leave all your phone, leave all your money, everything you have. Just go to the street and then just sit there somewhere in a corner for a day. Try to survive. At the end of that day, and tell you what, you're not even going to make it to the end of the day before you realize how fucking good you have it. And that's the sort of perspective that I think is largely missing from a lot of people's lives, but also most importantly, I feel like contemporary culture as a whole, and that's just because that we're used to fighting the nature, we're used to fighting the torment of the cold and predators and other tribes coming at you with fucking spears and rocks and all that kinds of shit, and at the same time, we kind of.
I was listening, by the way. I just I know she'll keep scratching at the door if I don't let her in.
Yeah, that's fine, man. Please send my best regards to her, by the way. She's lovely.
I will.
Yeah, and yeah, this is the thing, man. And it's not to say that things couldn't be better, but I feel like, like for me, my life at the moment, it seems to be at a bit of a rapid progression. And a lot of that I feel like is founded in the fact that I kind of realized at a very core level, not at a surface level, but at a core level of my being, I realized, holy shit, this experience is fucking incredible, and you can make it so much better than it is just by dedicating yourself to your goals and just for consistently showing up. And not only that, you can potentially help other people do the same thing too, which is like, double the fucking dopamine. And I think that it's not to say that things couldn't be better, but when you realize how good you actually have it, and the fact that time in the corner is ticking, that's kind of like, I don't know, I don't know how that couldn't light a fire under anyone's ass to go and figure this shit out and keep pushing forward.
When you hit that 45-year birthday, that's when you start to think about that more, because your parents are a lot older. Obviously there's a lot of members of the Legion. A lot of my friends are now at that phase where they're starting to go to the funerals of their parents, fathers, mothers, whatever the case may be. And that does bring it home. You think to yourself, like, I think that was one of the realizations when I turned 45. I thought back to when I was 35, and I was like, I thought at the age of 35, 45 is old. Now I'm 45. I don't feel much different, but I'm starting to get to the point now where, you know, I'm at that age that I used to consider old. I mean, honestly, the first time I ever felt truly old in South Africa, there's this deference that people will give when they speak to you in Afrikaans. So it's kind of in our nature. It's very much like respect your elders. There's probably a little too much of it, to be quite honest with you. But you'll typically be referred to in Afrikaans as, if a younger kid speaks to you, like say a 10-year-old walks up to you, he will call you uncle. And he'll call he'll call your wife or your fiance, he'll call her auntie. And so when I was about, I think 26 or 27, I was actually in the sea busy bodyboarding at our vacation spot. And must have been like maybe a 15, 16-year-old kid came past me, like a guy, and he bumped into me and he's like, "Oh, sorry, uncle." Jammer. Fucking hell, man.
Ouch.
Jesus, dude, that's you just cut me deep. You may as well toss me to the sharks. But I want to pivot and talk a little bit about, you know, the changes in your life. So the first one, before we get to the more serious stuff, you're now officially a physical trainer. And I mean, I know you're doing it before, but you've now gone full time.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And it's really exciting, you know, and I'm very happy, you know, and much of that is I also have to thank all the people, all the clients I've had over the last. I mean, I've been doing the online coaching thing for 4 years now, and it's really amazing seeing some of the transformations in that time. And you know, I've kind of done that, you know, whilst working any other job. You know, like to me, the idea of working for many years was that I am working because I have one purpose, and that purpose is Trivax and to make that music happen, you know. So I'm happy to do whatever I need to do just to keep that thing going. All right. And I've been very lucky in that regards that I've had that in my life. I appreciate not everyone maybe gets to have something that they feel so passionate about that they're willing to like put everything on the line for. I get that. But then also, you know, it's something that is much easier said than done as well. You know, that you really put something that you start a journey in your own life and are willing to commit years and years and years of your life to it, you know, and just build a legacy out of it, essentially, you know. So to me, that was kind of how I always approached any kind of job role that I've had. And as a result, I have worked everything, you know. I've done all kinds of shit out there, a lot of stuff that people don't know about me. I've worked with hospitals, I've worked with bars, I was the head of reception at a casino for like 3 or 4 years, you know. I've done a lot of different things, you know, and I've seen a lot of very interesting shit and met interesting people as a result, and some very uninteresting people too, you know. And that's all good, you know. That's just all experience. But to me, if I can turn something that kind of ticks my box and makes me feel satisfied in the sense that, holy shit, I can actually guide someone to become a better version of themselves, because I was once there before. I was once 19 stone or 120 kilos, or I think it was like 262 pounds. I was once that, you know, and I lost like a third of that weight, essentially, kept it off. And I saw the amazing transformation that it did for my mind, you know, let alone like the body. You know, I feel like the body is literally a 5% of the real transformation that you can actually see, but the rest of it is all up here and in you, you know. And to me, if I can pass that same experience to other people and actually simultaneously be able to pay the bills, it's like fucking, you know, peanut butter and jelly. It's fantastic, you know. So to now have the opportunity to go full time with that, it is truly, and I really mean this, truly a blessing to be able to do this, you know. And I am on a mission. I'm on a mission to actually help humans and people as much as I can, you know, whether it's with the music or whether it's with the personal training or the podcast or anything that I'm doing, you know. I really want to do that, you know, because once again, I know what it looks like when you're down in the dumps, you know. And honestly, physical training and physical exercise, it seems so surface level until you get into it and you realize that it's actually a process of physical and mental and spiritual alchemy that is truly fascinating, you know. So I'm very stoked about it, man. You know, and thank you for the good words and for bringing it up. Actually, I'm very
100%. I was going to ask, like, is there, what job have you done that people would be particularly surprised about? I remember you spoke to me about being the, you know, working reception at the casino. Is there anything that you've done that, I mean, aside from, you know, illegal shit, is there anything that you've done that people would just absolutely be shocked by?
Well, that's it, you know, like you said, you know, I can't really talk about the illegal stuff, you know, because that was kind of the most of the jobs that I did back in the day, you know. And you know, so when we were trafficking some people, no, I'm just joking, but
somebody's gonna clip that one out of context.
Yeah, please do. It's good for it's good publicity.
Good for the views. Yeah,
get a few new eyeballs. Wait, there's a black metal guy trafficking people? No. But there's a whole story about how Trivax almost got trafficked out of Iran back in the day, by the way, which I've never shared. Maybe we can get into that later. But just to answer your question, in terms of jobs, let's see. Fucking hell, man, I've done so many things. I mean, I used to work at a fucking pizza shop, an Iranian pizza shop. And I was working, I mean, this is a very long time ago, but I was working cash in hand. And I think I was getting 350 pounds per hour at the time. Okay. And yeah, bro, your face says it all. Yeah. I mean, I totally rinsed the fucking chicken toppings they had. You know, I had so much fucking free pizza. This is back when I was a little chubby and didn't really know nutrition very well.
Yeah.
The amount of
you weren't checking, you weren't monitoring those macros.
I was not, bro, and I had so many fucking freebies on pizzas, and I was doing fucking pentagrams with the ketchup sauce on top of them and everything, you know. But yeah, and then I actually, you know what? I progressed. I've progressed everywhere I've been, you know, and in that job, after 1 month, they gave me a pay rise of 350 to £4. Four great British pounds an hour I was getting doing the pizza job. But yeah, man, I guess, yeah, I think the casino one was kind of the most eventful thing I ever did. Because like literally in the first week that I was there, I watched people get knocked out. You know, I mean, I've seen a lot of people get knocked unconscious just whilst being there, you know. And this was like pre-COVID, so it was fucking crazy, man. You know, like some of the stuff there, it was amazing. Like I remember one time we used to get there was dog races next door to us that was owned by the same chairman who ran the casino and owned the casino for like many years. He also owned football clubs and stuff. I won't mention his name here, but I actually got along really well with him as well, you know, as someone who was like that high up, multi-millionaire, you know, like he was loaded as fuck. But like I always just got along really well with the guy, you know, and I used to like host like game shows and shit at the casino. But the thing with that was within that first week, so we used to get the dog races. We got a massive queue of people outside coming in on like a Saturday. This guy comes in, and on the system, if you were like barred from the casino, the system would like light up, would basically, you know, they would give you their details, name, date of birth, and then the system would start flagging saying, okay, this person is barred. And literally, this message popped up saying that this customer is barred for taking a shit in the car park outside the entrance. And, you know, like there's this, bearing in mind, there's a massive queue of like at least 20 people just inside the building. There's so many more outside. And this guy starts going like, oh, why am I barred then? And then the head reception at the time, Sharon, just turned around to him and said, the note on here says that you took a shit in the car park. And then everyone just starts laughing. The guy just walks out with his tail between his legs. It was fucking, it was priceless, man. You know, I saw some fucking crazy shit. You know, people coming in with like fucking, you know, box cutters and, you know, drug dealers. And some crazy Iranian guy one time smashed one of the slot machines over 20 pounds, you know, and then he owed like $1.5 grand to the casino afterwards and they barred him. and people stealing money from like their dad's shop and then coming in, and then one of the security lads had to let him out through the back door because his dad came chasing him at the casino. Like all kinds of like crazy shit, you know. Like I've seen all of this, and I guess this is the first time I've ever talked about it, so people don't know the kind of shit
that I
say.
The statute of limitations is over now, so you can reveal all. That's going to be that'll be the title of the episode. Shayan reveals all about the seedy underbelly of UK casinos.
Bro, honestly, Jackie, and there's, you know what? There's a couple of things I'm actually not at the liberty of sharing on here, but I saw some things. I definitely saw some things on there. Yeah,
I can imagine.
Yeah, but it was good. You know, it was good because in the daytime it was really quiet, and when it was quiet, I was just basically running all the band accounts, you know, and you know, just trying to promote and push Trivax as much as possible. When we recorded LOA Burns Out, I was working there, you know, so in between all of like the shifts and things, even whilst I was at work, I was like talking to Sam, our producer, talking to the Indonesian guy who did the cover, talking to all the guys, you know, and I was like that was like my first sort of run with like working a job full time, but then also like running the band at like at the time, at least like a semi-professional level, you know, and doing all of the organizing, you know, and just kind of like getting addicted to the process itself and just working, you know. So it's a very good experience, you know, whilst it lasted. You know, I'll never do night shifts again, but you know, I don't regret doing it, you know.
Yeah, it's like you make, between the experience of doing it and just the fucking funny stories that you're left with, it's it was worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, let's talk about Trivax's music. How do you feel now that, I mean, the album's been out for, I think, 9 months? How do you feel about the response that The Great Satan got? Because I know, obviously, we spoke as you were recording it, and you know, I know you had a huge amount of confidence in it, rightfully so, in my view.
Thank you.
I would say before you answer, I think one of the most encouraging things for me about the record was seeing Trivax go out to a much wider audience than you'd had with LOA Burns Out. You know, it turned up on best of lists on reputable websites, not Boza rubbish. It turned up on you know, YouTube channels that were, again, you know, I would consider at least modestly reputable. You know, there seemed to be a lot more awareness of the band, and if there was a negative review, I've yet to see it. I've not seen anything written by anybody that was overtly negative about the record. Everyone seemed to really embrace it and like it.
No, man, look, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm not someone who gets overly caught up with the thing of what people are saying, you know, but I think contrary probably to a lot of what's the right thing to say as a black metal artist, you know, and you know, I do care. I want the people who are listening to the band to listen to the album and feel satisfied, like, oh, fuck yeah, this gave me the kick I wanted today, you know, and like also give people something to think about as well. I think that's one thing that's, in my own opinion, a very strong point of the album is that you got your good riffs, and, you know, I think production is fairly reasonably solid for an album of this style. But I think that it gives you something to think about, you know, with the lyrics and with the concept of the album as well. And you know what's the funny thing? I also got to give some credit to Osmos Productions, because it's like, now people, obviously, you know, I think thousands of people have seen what that cover art looks like, and we got a lot of very, very excellent feedback on it. But I was kind of, I was nervous before I submitted that artwork to them, because I'm like, fuck, you know.
Oh, I remember when you sent it to me, I was nervous on your behalf. I showed it to Paige, and I was like, holy shit, like he's really not fucking about with us.
and this was the reaction of every person that I showed it to at the time, you know. I remember I even showed it to Kyle from Vitriol when I did that in-person interview with him in Bristol. And that, you know, before submitting that to the label, I was like, fuck, we've already done this, we've paid for it. I don't want them to now turn around and say, oh shit, you know, like you can't put this out there, this is dangerous or whatever. And we know what France is like as well when it comes to Islamism, you know, and issues like that. It's a fairly serious issue there. And you've got stuff like Charlie Hebdo, and they don't have a good history with that at all. So I was very nervous before I submitted it to the label. This is just an honest thing, that I was thinking. But when I sent it to them, Hervé, the label boss, responded just, like it was like a long list of things, that I had like sent to them, and the cover was in there. And it was something to the effect of, yeah, this sounds good. We'll do the release such and such date. By the way, I fucking love the artwork. And I was like, yes, that's it. That's how we know we got with the right label. They at no point got in our way of anything creatively. They at no point said, oh, guys, you can't say that. You can't sing this. You can't do this or that, And bear in mind, I think how we do things in Trivax is I think we kind of do it in a very tasteful way. I think our criticism is, without sounding overly pretentious, there is a degree of wit to the way we go about criticizing the religion, but also the regime as well. We're not. I agree. I always say, you'll never find me, like wrapping a fucking bacon around the Quran, and then setting it on fire. That's not exactly my style. Although I just saw this band the other day, Polish band. I forget their name. I really want to give them credit. They went on stage. I don't know this band. I've never heard of them, but they went on stage and put a dagger through a Quran, posted it, and in the caption they thanked me for the inspiration. And I was like, this is fucking killer. Thanks, guys. Like way to go. More of that, please. So yeah, it's interesting. But just to also answer your question about the album, I mean, it's been fantastic, man. It's so good to just get that material out there, because what people don't realize is that the material on The Great Satan, I started writing that in January 2020. And then obviously the writing kind of went all the way until 2023 when Eloah came out. But by the time The Great Satan came out, the material is actually kind of old. The performance is from July and August 2024, but the actual material itself and the riffs are kind of, they got a bit of age to them. So it felt really, really good to finally kind of get that out there. And because we were waiting on the release of Eloah for so long, and we had already made Eloah in 2019. It was mixed and mastered. It didn't come out until 4 years later. So we spent all of that time refining The Great Satan. So for that to be out, artistically, it just felt like such a satisfying thing. And to actually play those songs live, we just played in Estonia this last weekend gone, and it's just such a joy to finally be able to not just tell people about the band's name, but to show people. It's like, okay, here's what we can do. But in line with that, if I make this a little bit more exciting, hopefully, I don't know if I already mentioned to you, the next Trivax album is already confirmed, and we are not far from actually going back into the studio. That much I can tell you.
I was going to say, so you kind of almost, you're up to date now. So what does that mean as far as new material is concerned? But yeah, that's very exciting to hear.
It is, man. It's going to be fucking bonkers, and I think it's going to be out before people realize it, because I sometimes look back at, my own favorite bands, and you look at the rate at which some of these bands were releasing music, like Iron Maiden probably being a prime example. It's like literally every single album they put out in the 80s is an all-time classic. And when you look at the year and the time gaps in between those albums, it's ridiculous. Like the first 3 albums, it was just like once a year. They were just shitting out classic after classic. You got the debut, you've got Killers, and then you've got, Number of the Beast? Like they all came out like just 1 year apart from each other. That's fucking ridiculous.
You got Bathory in 1984. You got The Return in 1985. You got Under the Sign of the Black Mark in 1987. Blood, Fire, Death 1988. So again, super prolific. Just album after album after album.
Exactly, yeah. And you can say the same about Slayer. You can say the same about Metallica. So to me, same about Death as well. Like all of his albums were more or less a year or so apart from each other. At least the first 4 or 5, anyway. So to me, I don't see anything wrong with if maybe Trivax releases another album maybe within the next year. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think people will be quite stoked if we did such a thing, you know.
Yeah,
And
maybe
often-
release it
Yeah.
towards the end of the year. That could work. I would.
No, I'm not-
I'm more from a business perspective. I would never advise a band to release an album in January. I mean, I know we had the Ruins of Beverast this year, and you know we've had a couple of other good things this year. But January to me is just that's like a really dead month. I think December used to be a dead month. I don't see that anymore. I think Norma Evangelium Diaboli did us all a favor by dropping those surprise Funeral Mist records on us, you know, for a couple of they don't do it yearly, but you know we've had a couple of years where that's happened. So now everyone is kind of waiting in anticipation for like something cool to drop in December that no one was expecting. So December sort of has its own thing now, but January is a dead month. So yeah, if you release it, I would, if I were your business manager, I would say drop something in December, first week of December or end of November.
That would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So I'm just again there's no worse vice than advice, but that's if I were advising you, that's what I would say.
I agree with you. I'll say about that much. Yeah.
Look, I mean, we're talking about the last two albums really sort of being creatively a backlog for you that you've worked through and now released. In those, in the preceding years, how much have you evolved, do you feel, as a songwriter? Oh, because I know your taste in music has changed since I've known you. It's changed, and it's become. I mean, you've gone through, I think, a similar journey to a lot of people, but I've definitely seen your music taste really expand.
Yeah, I mean, you know, to me, it's interesting you say that. Actually, I mean, what I listen to is, I would say, I am mostly a death metal guy. That's what a lot of people don't realize. And maybe you can look at my vocal style and say, oh yeah, actually, now that you say that, it makes sense. Actually, it's not that. It's just that I like my music to be punchy and uplifting and just fucking murderous. I want it to be fucking strong. I want you to listen to the music and be able to do PRs to it. I want you to listen to the music of Trivax and think that you can use your bare fists and kicks to take over an army of tanks. That's what I want you to get out of it, okay? And then in between the adrenaline and the testosterone, I want moments of reflection. And, you know, and you know what? As I say that, I realize what I've described is literally my personality. You know, it's like
fighting tanks and then thinking about it afterwards.
Yeah, fighting tanks and then just leaving some room to be melancholic and appreciate the fragility of life afterwards. That's me. That's me. You know, that's you know, that's my whole being. You know, and I think I found a really good gear to sort of transform and not necessarily filter, but manifest that in the musical sense, you know. And I'm and I can guarantee you that, I mean, we have ideas of how the next potentially 3 albums are going to look like. Okay, so you know, like, to me, I'm conceptually quite far ahead, but when it comes to the execution, then it comes to like dealing with what's in front of us. And what I can tell people is, you know, you can expect that same progression that you saw from LOL Burns Out to The Great Satan. You're going to see the same thing to the album after it, and then you're going to see it to the album after as well. But we're at the point where the progression is no longer a matter of skill, but it's a matter of intentionally setting the steps so each album seems more impressive than the one before. And that is something that we are, I guess we are quite I don't want to say lucky, but we are at such a degree with our craft that we can control our own expression in such a way. And I'm very, very excited about that. I'm very excited for people to hear the next Trivax album, and I'm very excited for them to hear the one after that. So what I will also say is that, as always, Trivax remains unpredictable. So even though these steps, when you look in hindsight and you can see the growth, in the moment, you won't be able to predict what the next album's going to sound like, and you won't be able to predict what the next album's going to sound like. And in the band, within ourselves, as the artists, we already know what that looks like. And I am extremely excited for the time ahead.
What got you into that mode of thinking, like that would be your approach? Because it kind of sounds like there's a specific plan to it, which I like, and I like the sound of. But was there a particular band that inspired you, or what sort of got you to think in that direction?
That's a great question, and I'll tell you exactly why. It's not a specific band that inspired that, no, but I think, well, in fact, I know the thinking behind it is the following, is that we are essentially writing a map of our lives. So these albums are designed in such a way so that in the future, when we're possibly not here anymore, maybe the members of the band or even myself, maybe we're not around anymore, but others can observe what Trivax did. Others can observe that they went from this release to this release. What did this release coincide with? The events of that time? How old were the guys when they did this album? Because that's exactly what I do when I listen to other albums of other bands. And many of those bands and artists, prime examples being, ones that have actually passed away, definitely left that mark on me. When you look at the legacy of, say, someone like Chuck Schuldiner, since you're wearing the Death shirt, literally Death is one of my all-time favorite bands of all time, ever. And to me, when you see the progression that he went through as a human being and see the way which that reflected in his music, everyone looks at Chuck now and think, what a legend, what a great riff writer. He seemed like a nice guy. But he went through fucking hell in many of those years. He was tormented by the amount of hate that he was getting, all the way from like late 80s, early 90s, where people were spreading rumors about him. And this was in the age of no internet, so people were like constantly going up to him at shows saying, oh, is it true that you done this? Is it true you done that? And he was tormented by this. But he never fucking quit. He never quit. Yes, the lineups fell apart. There were tours that he didn't even show up on, like earlier in the band's career. There's a famous case that, that he never wanted to talk about, understandably so. But nevertheless, he never fucking quit. And he left a fantastic legacy behind. And he could have carried on for longer, but when you look at the Death discography, you see a very beautiful progression of a human being as well as an artist. And that is such a fantastic thing to behold, and I could say the same about Bathory and many others of the same sort of journey, And I think that, even Dissection, I think the 3 albums of Dissection to me is a very interesting sort of legacy sort of build up, if you look at it like that. Not necessarily one that, where I would like condone his choices of things, because he made a lot of horrific mistakes, but let's look at the music. Let's look at the music. Let's look at the lyrical concept. I think that still in itself is very interesting. And I think for me, I'm fascinated with the concept of hindsight and in the concept of looking back as the body of work of a band as a legacy that sort of maps out, And I think that whether consciously or subconsciously, that's kind of what we're doing with Trivax as well. Hence why we're so intentional about the way we're kind of creating that gap in between the albums that we're putting out. So yeah,
just on
very
the
good
topic
question.
On the topic of Dissection, have you now read Far Beyond All Light, that book about John Notfight?
I haven't. You know what? I haven't had the chance yet. I know you and I talked about this a bit. I have an idea what to expect.
Don't expect much. The book is atrocious. But one of the things that we spoke about offline, and it actually comes back to what we were talking about earlier about the nihilism, things like that. I'm not nearly as versed in these matters as you, which is why I asked your opinion. The thing that I could not wrap my head around reading the book, because the book goes into a lot of detail about his beliefs and about what the MLO stood for. It tries to present it as something that is, very positive and great. But to me, the more I read it, contemplated it, and I just could not wrap my head around what is the upside in this belief system and in this in this way of thinking. For me, if I were I know they're not going out like the Scientologists recruiting people, but you know what I mean. If I were to consider this as my religion, why would I consider it? And I could not for the life of me see anything about it that's positive. Nothing. I don't see anything that physically benefits me. I don't see anything about it that mentally benefits me. And that's what was fucking with me while I was on holiday. I kept thinking, like, what am I missing something here, or is this just some dumb shit?
Well, I think there's a very simple and straightforward answer to your question, and it's that it's not supposed to be beneficiary. And that's actually kind of the whole point of it, And that's not to say I agree with that. I actually fundamentally disagree with that way of thinking. But the way it approaches, I mean, like, the thing with Satanism is that it has so many different layers to it. I've never met or spoken to two people who actually identify as Satanists that even remotely think the same. They all think differently, And I think the case of dissection is a very tricky one, because you have a musician's legacy and someone who created some pretty awesome music. You had some fantastic riffs. But then there are some personal choices alongside that. Now, you don't want that person to be remembered as a loser or like someone who failed. So then you start to focus on the spiritual element and the path that person took. But unfortunately, I think a lot of people fall for the hype of that. Like I'm sort of in a similar position as you, in the sense that I've not been able to get a single solid answer on why this is good, but then it is inherently meant to be anti-cosmic. It is inherently meant to be something that's anti-existence. Whereas to me, there's a layer to that can be very interesting and can be very intriguing, and that is when you start to discuss the idea of breaking out of not just reality, but breaking out of samsara. That is very interesting to me. That always piques my interest. And this is something that far exceeds the intellectual conversations amongst extreme metal. In fact, most of this conversation exists outside of metal and music, in fact. That's interesting to me. Where it doesn't appear so interesting is when the focus starts being on, okay, so we're anti-life, so let's just sing about the destruction of everything, and everything is fucked, everything is nihilism, let's travel into a black hole, fuck everything. And that to me is kind of fucking pointless. That to me is an insult to the privilege of being an alive, living human being.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's kind of where, I mean, if you want to talk about Satanism, first of all, I don't consider myself one. I have done in the past, but then I kind of arrived at a point where I was like, okay, well, how many people do I actually know that are real Satanists? How many of these people would I actually consider as a person I can look up to? None. They're all fucking losers. I don't want to be like any of them. None of them can hold up a fucking job. None of them can run their own business successfully. Worse than all of that, none of them can hold up a relationship successfully. They all have problems and they all have their demons and toxic shit. Fuck that. I don't have time for that. I am interested and I'm driven towards a path of human excellency and spiritual wholeness. Now, if you then discuss the context of you have a set of laws in reality that you want to get away from, and that there's things that are being projected into reality and holograms, that the moon's empty and all this kind of stuff, I'm interested in that conversation. That at least seems kind of intriguing to me. But this whole thing of, like we are still in the now, we are still in the moment, and you still have to live life. You still have to play by the rules of life. The only way out is through, and that is true. So to me, that's kind of where I draw the line. Is that when I was younger, the idea of theistic Satanism and all of that was extremely fascinating to me. But then you realize that, there's a very real aspect to this, and there are certain deities and frequencies that once you start messing with that, your whole life gets fucked up, and it's going to be very, 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 very hard to crawl out of it. And I think spiritual awareness is a very important thing that's seriously lacking in today's world. What kind of frequency do you even expose yourself to? What kind of frequency and things do you even allow into your life? Because you're a spiritual vessel, essentially. So what are you going to allow in your vessel alongside yourself? That influence can be something that can be very damaging. And we see the case of it with what happened with Dissection. But because it's a legacy-based music journey or career, then you have to kind of paintbrush it with this thing of, you have to brush it with this idea of, oh, this is what he always wanted to do, and that's why I don't buy it.
I was about to say, I've spoken to quite a few people who knew him when he was young, and they do not describe him to me as somebody. They don't describe him to me as the book describes him in his later life. For me, the book, just in summary, I think it's an incredibly tragic story. It's the story of a musician that had extraordinary talent, talent that was, I would say, generational. And he got involved with a death cult and ruined his life. That's the easy. I mean, if you want the cliff notes of the book, there it is. One of the most generational talents in the history of extreme music, unquestionably, both as a technical guitar player and as a songwriter. Got involved with a death cult, and got to the end, effectively ruined his life. Got to the end of the road. And amassed along the way, a small group of mind-melted imbeciles who, as the writer of the book does as well, try to justify his killing of another man by saying, "Well, he didn't subscribe to the rules of society, so you should have expected it." I mean, there's several paragraphs in the book that effectively says, "I don't consider it a crime because he didn't." It's like, dude, come on now. I can understand if you could try and gain some sort of clarity around the philosophy, but when you start stumping for that kind of dumb shit, and then the other thing that maybe this is just maybe this is my sort of cultural inflection on it, but if I stumbled across someone I thought was a bro that had pulled together a list of people that he was going to sacrifice and my name was on it, then it's game over. That's not something I would ever abide by.
No, I agree,
and that's why I say, I'm not saying this is as a means of slating him. I'm saying this is that I'm mentioning it as the tragedy of the story. It's like a guy who I know people who knew when he was young and speak so highly of him to have gone down that path, and that's where you end up planning to kill your bros.
Well, let's look at it like this. I mean, a few things to what you said. Like what you mentioned that, people who knew him when he was younger. I would have had people who knew me when I was younger who would have never, ever been able to see me be in the position that I am today. Where it's like, oh yeah, that guy's gonna change his life around and he's gonna end up touring everywhere and he's gonna fucking, have a platform that actually, like, where he tries to help people. Like, that would have been the most unlikely expectation of me when I was younger. Okay, so one thing that is true, just to put this out there, is that people do change. Okay, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worst.
Oh, and I recognize that. I mean, in your case, you invited into your life an exceptionally positive influence in me. no, but I mean, you invited exceptionally positive.
No question. No, I know you're laughing about it, man. No question. Yeah. I very much value our friendship. Just putting that out there.
Oh, ditto. I said it the other day on the podcast. I said, I think I was midway through a news rant, and you know what it was? It was a swirly, I think, that I dished out to some idiot who called you a white nationalist after the interview on Wyatt's Metal.
Bro, that was so funny. Fucking
and I said,
hell,
like, when I refer to him as my brother from another mother, I'm not kidding. I mean that literally.
Yeah, man.
So, we'll put a pin in that. We'll get to that in a second. But I mean, it is the inverse here, right? So when people knew you as a young man, you were a wild Cheyenne. Now you're a very different dude, but kind of John went down a different route, and as I said, sadly, a route that took him away from this mortal coil, and robbed us of God knows what he would have created artistically later on in his life.
Well, you know what? If we're going to talk about people who know him closely, I also know I have spoken to in depth, not on the podcast, but in person, to people who knew him for years. They knew him pre-jail and post-jail. And the person I'm referring to, by the way, is from arguably, I won't name him, but you can maybe guess, he's from arguably the most well-known, or one of the most well-known Swedish black metal bands of all time. Okay.
Arch enemy.
And who? And this gentleman, he also knew Varg, and he said the same. He said these people go to prison and they just lose their fucking minds, and they're not the same anymore, And even he, as someone who's been in black metal, by the way, they're still going, and then he said that to me. He said that it's very clear that they go to prison and then something happens there. They lose their mind. They come outside. He said the same about Varg as well, because he also knew Varg personally as well. And this is what happens, and that to me is a much more believable thing, But I get that there are people who are close to him that are trying to hold up this image of, wow, this is this guy, who lived life on his own terms, and that's a very attractive thing. I was very much drawn to that as I was younger, but having spoken to a lot of people that were actually around him, including Bryce as well, who we've had both out on the podcast, and also knowing a lot of stuff that happened behind the scenes, he had a, like, I agree with you. It's a very tragic thing, and I'm at that point where I have the absolute pleasure and the privilege of seeing someone that a musician that I idolized and revered for so many years, to see the actual person, to see the person that now granted, I never met him, but I am at that position where my information is fairly complete. I'm sure there's still more stuff, and more stories, but he only lived for basically the age that I am now. And I am in that position where I get to see both the talent, the great songwriting, the great passion. I feel. Did you ever listen to that song by his band when he was a teenager? I think it was a band called Thunder.
No.
And then there's the oh my God, it's beautiful, man. It's beautiful, but it's also really sad when you listen to it, and then the lyrics are something like, I've got a dream and I'm gonna make it true, and you can hear how talented he was as a young teenager. I think he was 14 when he recorded that. That song is no longer on YouTube. It's not online anymore for some reason. I don't know. Maybe it's on a Reddit post somewhere. But he clearly was very talented. He was destined for great things, but he got mixed in with the wrong crowd, if you want to say that. Had some very tragic things happen in his personal life. Without going into much details, it's not my place to really say. But
some of it is mentioned in the book.
Okay, yeah, it might be, but again, how it's portrayed might be a different story as well. So I'm at that privilege, where I get to see the mystique kind of wash away, and then just see the facts and realize that, wow, what a tragic loss. Because sometimes I wonder, as as a genuine fan of dissection, I sometimes wonder, like, fuck, if he stuck around, what would they have sounded like, and me and the old guitarist in Trivax, him and I, we always used to talk about how they probably would have ended up sounding a bit like Grand Magus, just because of like especially the guitar playing style. Because if you notice, they have very similar guitar playing styles, and then this is not just the fact that they both played white Gibson Flying V's, but the actual, like, it's that Swedish temperament of like implying heavy metal in a little bit more of an extreme manner, and I would have been very curious to sort of hear that. But for that to have happened, he would have had to have gotten a job. The band wouldn't have been sustainable financially, as big as they look on the Rebirth gig. Yeah, the Rebirth gig is fucking massive. It sold out 3 times and they moved the venue. And then that wasn't every show, and the very last show that they played, it wasn't like that at all. So, and as a band, if you can't play America, it's almost impossible to make a living, because every professional musician that I know is like, America is half of their market, and that's because of how apeshit people go over there for the merch. Okay. And it just like wouldn't have worked. He would have had to have gotten a job. Good luck doing that with a fucking criminal record. Good luck when half the country, if not most of the country, knows who you are because there was a documentary about the murder that you committed. It's just really messy, man. It's fucked up, So I'm not saying I judge him for his last decision that he made necessarily, but just a little bit of context that, like, he made some pretty terrible choices, and ultimately had a price to pay for that, and he would have had to have made some serious changes if he wanted to stick around, but obviously he chose not to. But with that note, I don't want to miss the point of that comment of the swirly that you mentioned as well. I would really like to touch on.
Well, no, let's get into that. So,
yeah.
As things stand right now, I think I saw this morning planes being sent to Guam. I think they're busy stationing them at. But it looks like things are really starting to pick up, potentially ahead of steam now, as far as Iran is concerned. So I guess first question for you, I want to say before you answer, or before I ask the question, I should say, the interview you did with Wyatt, I thought was excellent. I think that's why I think I partly took offense to it because we're friends, but I also partly took offense to it because it was just so chronically stupid that somebody would listen to what you had to say there, which I thought was very measured. Clearly came from a place of having lived there and, knowing the country, understanding the culture, understanding the application of theocracy there, to then accuse you of white nationalism. I just thought was just fucking nuts. But since the conversation that you had with Wyatt, what have you heard now from your family, from friends, people that that are still based there?
First of all, thanks for your comments on that interview, man. I was very happy with how that one turned out. I thought it was great, of the kind of space Wyatt just kind of gave me to just go on there and just talk about things, and it seemed like a lot of people were actually just discovering us for the first time on that interview, which is always fantastic.
Dude, I think that interview did really well. It did you guys the world of good. And shout out to Wyatt. I mean, he is the real deal. There's no question about it.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. And the thing about, you're asking now what's happening with Iran. I think we're all waiting. The Iranian people, all over the world, inside Iran, myself included, we're just waiting, you know. And it's a diabolical situation. They have murdered, at this point, it's looking something north of 100,000 people on the streets. And not just in the streets, people in the hospitals, people in their homes, people in prisons. They've been just massacring Iranian people. And by they, I'm referring to the Islamic Republic, in case anyone's wondering. Okay. And at the same time, they're also playing this huge propaganda game of saying, "Oh, you can wear hijab on the street. You don't have to wear hijab on the streets." You know, they sent this absolute horrible human being of a woman to Iran from the UK to say that, "Oh, I'm stood here on the streets of Iran and we're celebrating the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution, blah blah blah," and she's not wearing a hijab there, but simultaneously when she was giving speeches in Iran, she was always wearing a hijab, you know. So it's like they were playing like a two-fronted sort of propaganda game, you know, which you can see straight past that. But some of the you know, I think it's worth just mentioning that that's what was happening, you know. And at the same time as that woman is out there doing that kind of propaganda, I actually saw it as a good sign, because the hijab, the enforced hijab law, has been a staple characteristic of the Islamic Republic. So the fact that they're so desperate that they are willing to publicly bend that rule just for the sake of one PR campaign, I think that's wonderful, because that tells us all how weak they actually are. That tells us all how close they are, how much they are on their knees. And they're gonna go soon. I think the chapter of the Islamic Republic is over, and you know, but what a shame that it is at the cost of thousands of lives that were taken, you know, because the country will change, the Islamic Republic will fall, but those people who lost their lives on the streets of Iran, all across the country, chanting against the Islamic regime and chanting for Prince Reza Pahlavi, all those people who died, like, we can't bring them back. The best that we can do is build a better country in their memory and to honor their sacrifice. And not only this, once Iran gets freed, a lot of things will begin to change all around the globe. The power dynamic will shift massively. Okay. At the moment, if you want to talk about geopolitics and things like that, and if you want to talk about ideology, the West is in a pretty scary situation. But once Iran joins, and once Iran is able to build its own sovereign identity, once again, things will be far better for the future of humanity as a whole. That's how I see it.
Well, you know, I think a lot of people that, you know, frankly, let me ask you this question first to set the context for what I was going to ask. What's been your observation and your reflections of the response to what happened in Iran in your newly adopted homeland of the United Kingdom, and in places like the US?
I'm a generally very optimistic person. I think this response, or lack thereof, I should say, has been, it's difficult not to get nihilistic when you see that. It's very difficult to see when people like Greta Thunberg or like all the other Hollywood celebrities that are going on talking about human rights and throwing around the word genocide are so definitely silent when thousands of Iranians are getting massacred. You know, all the people who are afraid to say something, oh, in case it's Islamophobic, or oh, we know that Israel's bad, so we can't say anything against what Iran's doing to its own citizens. Nonsense. It's fucking nonsense. You know, the fact that, you know, on one hand, I'm seeing people that, you know, even people like friends that I knew, you know, like I'm getting messages from people saying like, oh yeah, someone like I met this woman the other day, and she was saying that her brother had someone next to him get shot in the head, and her brother was a doctor, you know, so all night him and 3 other doctors stayed up just pulling shrapnel and bullets out of people and treating wounds. All night they stayed up doing that. And meanwhile, you got people over here sitting in the comfort of their homes. You got dickheads like Roger Water going out saying, oh, regime change is not the will of the Iranian people. Oh, really? Oh, is that why they're willing to get shot for it? Is that why they're pulling out to the fucking streets, chanting Javid Shah, which by the way, that means long live the king. That's a direct slogan, anti-Islamic Republic slogan in support of Prince Reza Pahlavi to come and take over as the transitionary leader of as the leader of the transitionary government of Iran before Iranians can actually go to the ballot boxes and vote for themselves. Now, whether they want to, you know, like a Republican style government or democratic, liberal, whatever the fuck, you know, like Iranians can't vote right now. So the whole purpose of this is to overthrow Islamic Republic and then allow for the opportunity for people to be able to vote at least. You've got people who know nothing about the situation, that are, even when they make comments, it's to say that, oh, well, they're doing this just because the US is trying to take over Iran for the oil. Motherfuckers, Qatar is currently raping Iran and has been doing so for a long time. Through the southern border of Iran, Qatar has been having a fucking whale of a time with Iranian resources. And in the meantime, they're investing all of their funds into an Islamic propaganda worldwide. They've got bots everywhere. They've got people everywhere. They're investing that money to further the Islamic conquest. It's a Muhammadi imperialism. So that's what we're up against. So between the two of those, I'm sorry, but I would much rather, in fact, I'm not fucking sorry at all. I would much rather Iran be on the side of the USA. In fact, an Iranian-US alliance would be a fucking dream. That would be an amazing thing to have. And this is what the Iranian people want. And you know what? Here's another thing as well. I'm sat over here in the UK talking to you about this. Okay. And I find it's my responsibility to represent as best as possible the voice of the actual Iranian people that are pulling to the streets, literally risking their lives, getting shot, getting fucking murdered to actually be able to have a free society and a free government. Okay. So it's not even, it wouldn't be right for me to twist that truth and narrative, which, by the way, is what, unfortunately, some people who are in one way or another have some kind of background from Iran. Some of these people are now coming out saying, oh, I don't support Reza Pahlavi. I don't support monarchism. You fucking idiots. That's not for you to say. You're supposed to just echo the voices of the Iranians inside Iran because they had their fucking internet caught. They're getting fucking shot at. That's not for you to come and play these intellectual games now in the midst of people getting hurt. They're literally going out, writing Trump's name on walls saying, please come and save us. And I know that's not a fake thing because that's exactly what I would have done if I was still there. If I was still in Iran right now, if I was still alive, miraculously, I would have been going out saying, I hope the US are going to come any minute. When I'm scrolling on Instagram, now that the internet's back on, literally all of my friends from Iran are posting saying, Trump, please come and fucking save us. Please come and attack. Now, you can sit out here and say, well, actually, that's not good. That'll create destabilization. That'll be this and that. in what fucking position are you to say that when people who are willing to eat bullets are saying that? Do you not understand how bad things are over there? Do you not understand the kind of situation that they have to fucking deal with? Do you think we're fucking stupid that we don't understand that this could create complications if America and Israel got involved? Of course we fucking understand it. We're not fucking dumb. We know that this is the case. We know that there's risks involved, but the mullahs gotta go. The mullahs need to fucking leave the face of the earth. And people can't do that on their own. People have got no weapons. You literally have a hostage situation, and people are saying, oh, don't call the police. Let the hostages take care of it themselves. That's literally what we're fucking dealing with over here. So, for some fucking progressive, intellectually obsessed with the smell of their own fart dickheads to come out and say, oh, there should be no military intervention and blah, 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 this is that. Fuck you. You're in no position to talk about this. So, on one hand, first you're silent about the genocide of thousands of people. Then you've been silent for years and decades about the oppression of women in Iran, whilst over here you're talking about feminism and human rights. And now that this is come into picture, you're saying, don't get involved? Go fuck yourself. I got no time for you fucking people. You have no idea what's happening over there. You will never understand how bad it is. You got to understand, people of a country wouldn't just come out for no fucking reason and say, please bomb us and save us of these fucking monsters. You will never understand that, and be lucky. Be fucking counting your blessings every single night that you don't know what that's like. But shut your fucking mouth when it comes to talking about Iran. You don't know what's happening.
Why do you think it is that there is a subset of the far left that is so eager to work hand in glove with, groups like the Islamic Republic, in the UK and the US, they'll work with kind of really fringe Islamic groups as well. And it seems to be, if on the face of things, that they have such contradicting moral stances on so many different things, and yet they seem to be such comfortable bedfellows. Now, part of this, I think, if anybody knows anything about Iranian history, which again, I feel like an awful lot of people that comment about Iran here in the West on social media have never bothered to, even read a Wikipedia entry about Iran's history. And I'm sure you'll bring this up in a second. But there is actually a historical precedent for this alliance as well. But I'll defer back to you.
No, it is. It is a historical alliance. You know what? What's so interesting to me? People want to say, oh, it's always the dark forces of the world. As far as I'm concerned, the dark forces of the world that are standing in the way of the progression of humanity are the ones that are trying to create segregation between ancient people. Amongst two of the oldest civilizations in the Middle East. You know exactly who I'm talking about. And the fact that the mafia group has taken over Iran. Like, as far as I'm concerned, that alliance, not only it has historical precedence, it is the key and it is the pathway to the evolution of humanity. And that our people will be involved, and look, when the mullahs are gone, what will also go away with them will be the funding of many different terrorist groups, okay? I know they're not freedom fighters. Fuck off. You don't know what freedom is if you think those cunts are freedom fighters. What will happen is when the mullahs are gone, the funding will stop for these people. They will stop getting armed. And also China will lose access to a lot of oil. Good, by the way. I'm glad. Okay. And that can be the only, that's got to be the only way forward. Okay. And I hope that the US, it seems at the moment that the US attack is going to be imminent. Okay. Something might have happened by the time this podcast goes out. My only hope is that they are as surgical and as efficient as possible. Okay. And that's part of the reason why it's taken a long time. A lot of Iranians are now starting to complain, saying, why are you doing deals with the mullahs? Why are you doing deals with the Islamic Republic? Why are you validating the IRGC? By the way, Britain is one of the only countries in the European vicinity that has yet failed to recognize IRGC as a terrorist organization. And I think that is very telling. I think that fucking says a lot about how disgustingly compromised the UK government is here. Bearing in mind that Ali Khamenei, Khamenei's son, in fact, has over 100 million worth of properties in just London. Did you know that?
Yeah, no, I knew about that.
And you've got, like they're just so fucking complicit, and I know people in London, who've given me a little bit of insider info, and they're fucking having all these cunts are running their operation without any fucking problems, without anything getting in their way, so the police isn't even on our side in this country. Okay, that's the sad fucking reality of things. And you gotta understand, and you've got traitors like Sadiq Khan in charge of a great city like London, which was once beautiful, truly great, truly amazing, home of innovation, home of business, home of finance, home of independence 10 years ago. Now it's something else. I'm afraid. But I truly hope that with the changes that will come in Iran, that greatness will once again be possible over here as well. And I really hope that people are listening and people are ready to put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, and again, you hope that the transition will come with minimal loss of life. That it doesn't end up being something similar to Iraq, because I can play devil's advocate.
Well, that's what I was referring to. Sorry to interrupt you there, but that's when I say surgical. That's exactly what.
I know. Because I know what you mean.
Iranian people have no quarrels with the United States or Israel, for that matter.
But again, to my the point you were making, it definitely shows how desperate people are for change when they're willing to put themselves in harm's way to that effect. And again, it's taken a long time for the news to be reported here. But I mean, finally now some news outlets have confirmed that they think just on the 8th and the 9th of January, when things started to properly flare up, the estimate is 36,000 dead, and I verified that while we were talking, and that's in 2 days. So anyone who might be listening thinking, "Oh, that 100,000 number, that sounds far-fetched," no, it's not.
It's actually strongly underreported.
Yeah,
this is actually strongly underreported. And I remember, I mean, there was no contact or any internet for like 2 or 3 weeks, so I just went on ages. When I first made the episode on Iran, when everything was kicking off last month, I had no updates at the time. I've heard from some people now, some people I never heard from again for the tragic reasons. But the fact of the matter is, like, they literally were, like, in some cities, they were like going out on the street and there was like mass waves of people and they're like literally opening gunfire and people are just dropping. They're like just dropping like flies. And these people are, that's somebody's son and daughter. That's just someone who is a university student or a little market guy, or that's someone's wife, or that's someone's child. The amount of children that have been shot and killed in Iran. The amount of, like, you got fucking 4-year-old girl just randomly shot at while she was in a car with her family. And the amount of times that's happened. And you can say, oh, there are bad actors. No, this wouldn't be happening if the Islamic Republic hadn't given explicit authorization for these forces to go out to do this. Okay, let's make that very, very clear.
Yeah, bad actors, might be 50, maybe 100 people, not hundreds, potentially hundreds of thousands of people.
And you know what they were doing, Jackie? They were, one of the things that kind of actually quite successfully deterred a lot of protests. People couldn't even stand next to each other on the streets safely anymore because they were standing next to people and then just sneakily stabbing them on the side and then running off. Okay, so they would join people. They would wear normal clothes, join people in the protest. Imagine you're there protesting, just like shouting, chanting, whatever. And then the next thing, you turn around and you got a fucking stab wound in your ribs. That's the kind of shit that people had to deal with. This is a real thing, okay? And this was one of the tactics that they were doing. And did you want to take a moment to talk about the burning of the statue of Baal?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you see that, first of all?
I saw you posted a load of stuff about it on Instagram. But I, to be honest with you, life has just been so chaotic recently. I'm kind of getting cliff notes of most things, and
no, that's fine. That's good. Actually,
the day comes to an end.
That's good. I really want to talk about this, okay? Because it's kind of goes a bit in line with our topics of discussion about Satanism and things like that earlier. Okay, so in an occult context. So what they were trying to do, there was two aspects to this. There's the PR aspect, and then there's also a magical aspect to what's happening. I'm referring to magic with the CK. When you burn the statue of something like that, of a figure like that, or a deity like that, traditionally speaking, rulers and governments and cults would do this as a sort of offering to stay in power, to maintain control. So in the lead up to this, they basically sacrificed thousands and thousands of people. Okay, they literally sacrificed people. They were killing them. And this was a sacrifice. This was also a ritualistic act that the Islamic Republic were doing. When you burn a statue like that, you're not insulting it or destroying it. You're actually releasing its powers. You're actually releasing an offering. That's why, and I want to be careful about how much I talk about magical and spiritual practice here. This is just a general rule of thumb. I think most people probably know this. Okay, you can just quick Google search, even that will probably tell you, because I don't want to give people instructions for magical things, because that has its own sort of energetic / karmic events attached to it, which I want to stay away from. But this is just a general piece of knowledge. When you're creating a ritual, when you're doing something, you normally, sometimes maybe you'll write something on a piece of paper and you'll burn that, or maybe you'll burn something. So the act of burning, you're not insulting it, you're releasing its powers. So the Islamic Republic literally did a fucking satanic ritual in front of the entire world by burning Baal's statue. The PR aspect of it is a dig at the Epstein situation to say that, oh, the West is corrupt. We're the good ones here because we are fighting against Satan. And a lot of people fall for this because their timing was also very relevant, by the way. Their timing was extremely relevant, which then makes you actually question like how coordinated all of this has been, from the release of the files to this happening and all these things, right? But when you burn a statue like that, if you were actually anyone who would have been in the vicinity of that statue would have been energetically affected, would have been essentially a part of the offering made to Baal. And this is the level that the Islamic Republic is at. That they are willing to do a satanic ritual, an actual satanic ritual that makes every motherfucker in black metal look like fucking choir boys, by the way. They're actually willing to do that. And think about it. Where the fuck did that statue come from? How long have they been in possession of that thing? That thing must have been set at a basement somewhere for fucking years. They didn't make that overnight. That's been sat there somewhere. The government's been in possession of that in case they had to fucking use it someday to further their control, to hopefully stay in power longest. But let's make one thing clear. You can't rely on fucking hexes and making mass sacrifices of human beings to stay in power. And regardless of what happened, regardless of the fact that they did that, the Islamic Republic will go. Their chapter in history is over. And yeah, what a crazy time to be alive and to see such a thing in public.
Let me ask you this question as a counter to, not counter, as the flip side to, some of this dark and morbid shit that we've been talking about. As a proud Iranian, what is the thing that you love about the Iranian culture, as you know it to be? Because I think you and I can relate to each other in this sense that there is, I can see, and South Africa is not in the same boat as Iran, even though our government would probably very much like us to be. But there is a lot of beauty, and there's an extraordinary amount of things about South African culture and about South African history, but about South Africa here and now that I absolutely love. That makes my spirit come alive every time I set foot on South African soil. So what is it for you about Iranian culture that inspires you so much and that fills you with so much light? Because you have to have that inspiration, I think, to be as bold in speaking about your country and in speaking about the things that happen in and affect your country as you do, especially in this climate.
Our incessant love for life and living and all things beautiful. And we exercise that love through poetry, through art, through dancing, through food. My God, Iranian food, some of the best ever. And that's what we are like. I even remember being, as a child, just sitting at home, during family gatherings, and with my mother and my aunt, from my dad's side, by the way, so not my mother's sister, but my my mother's sister-in-law, technically, all just sitting around, talking, laughing, having a great time, having a basket of fruits on the table. That's very common in Iranian households, is having a basket of fruits everywhere you go. It's really, it's cute, And then out of nowhere, for example, if a bit of music was on, my mother and my auntie or whatever, they'd just stand up and they'd start dancing. They'd just start dancing. Because why? That's in our blood. A love and appreciation for the human experience and the beauties of the world is something that is inherently ingrained deeply within us. And a fine example of that goes back thousands and thousands of years, when Cyrus the Great wrote the very first inscriptions of human rights recorded in history. And to treat people as equals, to treat people with respect, to treat them with kindness instead of imposing culture on them. You will find that Iranians, wherever they go, they do not try to impose their culture on anyone. They do not try to impose their religion on anyone. They do not try to impose their language on anyone. In fact, everywhere that we go, we want the host there to be as authentic to themselves as possible. That's what we want everyone to be. We want everyone to be the best versions of themselves instead of imposing our own will to them. And this is where Iran differs from the entirety of the Middle East, by the way. This is why Iranians are different. This is why when you see protests of Iranians, they're literally going around handing police officers flowers and roses. That, I think, creates a fairly clear picture. I tell you a funny story. Last year, Trivax was playing at Azadi Festival in Wiesbaden in Germany. You know, it's a small festival, and then, but we always get invited there. I'm going back there this year to do a podcast panel, you know, which I'm very excited about. And Azadi is an Iranian term. It means freedom. Okay, it's a very powerful term in Farsi. It's one of my favorite words in Farsi because of what it actually means and represents. And the lady who runs the festival, her parents actually, like, they help a little bit with the festival as well, you know, and they are the loveliest humans you've met. You know, her mother is German and their father's Iranian, Persian. Okay, her mother makes the tastiest rider. You know, she makes some lovely food, and the father, he's just such a great guy. You know, he's got a. I don't want to say exactly how old he is, but like he is like, you would never think that, oh, that's his age. You could easily say he's 20 years younger. You know, he's just like, you know, such a cool guy to speak to. He's so vibrant. And this was really funny. On the second day, when we had a day off after we had performed, I am, you know, personally, I'm obsessed with like anything that's like spa related, like saunas, cold plunge, stuff like that. I love it, you know, and Germany has a really good sauna culture. Okay, they take it like very seriously, actually. Like, you're not allowed to talk when you're in there, but then they do this like ritual every 30 minutes where you come in and then they start like blowing you with air and they release the aromas. I really like that part of German culture. It's great. But also it's tradition in Germany that you have to go to the sauna nude. Okay, which I understand for some people that might be a bit like, oh, I wouldn't feel comfortable. For me, I'm someone who's very comfortable in my own skin. If that's their tradition there, again, you know, I like to respect the traditions of the locals. Okay, if I go to a country where obviously you don't do that, you have to wear no problem. I'll wear something, you know. So, but I'm just saying, if that's their culture and tradition, I'm happy to respect it. Anyway, long story short, I went to the sauna and it was a beautiful place. It was like they had this like very Greek style interior and they had like fountains. It's a really nice place, you know. It was lovely, and obviously the place is mixed as well. And then I come back to the festival, you know, and I had a really nice, relaxing time. I was just like chilling on my own, you know, like, you know, not talking to anyone, but I was just like there in my own world, you know, and the sauna is like fucking hot as well, you know, so I was mostly just trying to survive that. I come back to the festival and I start talking to the guy and he's like, oh yeah, I heard you went to the sauna. And then I was like, yeah, man, it was a really beautiful place. Have you been? He was like, oh no, I haven't been to it yet. And then after a few questions, he kind of said to me, this is the lady's dad, the Iranian guy. And then he said to me, he said, so any nice items in there? Kind of thing. And I just started laughing. I said, bro, you could have just opened the conversation with that question, you know? And you know what he said? He said, you know, we were kind of like laughing and joking for a bit, and he didn't mean it in like a pervy or like a nasty way at all. It was very like funny how he said it. And then he says to me, he says, look, I am like, you know, he you know, he's like in his 70s or something. He said, look, I've made it to this age, and there's one thing that's so true to me, and it's that if you can't appreciate the beauty in life, then you might as well be dead. Like, if you don't appreciate beauty, what have you got? And I was like, fuck, man, you're so like goddamn right. So true, you know. And that's something that, you know, that love and lust for life and for good times, that's something that runs in Iranian and Persian culture, and that is the thing that I love about it the most. It's very life affirming, you know. That's what I love about it the most, to answer your question.
Well, mate, I can't think of a better way to wrap up another chapter in the ongoing. We were talking about legacy earlier, the legacy we're building of having done these episodes. Always such a massive pleasure to talk to you, brother. And
thank you,
we
man.
mustn't leave it this long again to do a podcast episode. I mean, we speak a lot anyway, but yeah, definitely shouldn't leave it this long to do another one of these.
Absolutely, brother. Look, the pleasure is all mine. You know, there's no one else I feel communicating with as comfortably and as openly as you. So, you know, my favorite podcast dancing partner, man. You know, thank you so much for having me. And you know what? I know this is not a fucking therapy session, but I kind of needed this tonight. You know, this was good. there was a lot of stuff I needed to get off my chest, but also to revisit a few thoughts out loud. This was a fantastic exercise, and I hope it was worthwhile for your audience as well.
I'm sure that it will be. Thanks so much, brother. We'll see you soon.
Hell yeah.
You just heard To Liberation and Beyond by Trivax. That is taken from their latest album, The Great Satan, released last year in May through Osmos Productions. And what a perfect way to cap off another fantastic conversation with my very good friend Shayan. I mean, truly, I always talk about it on the podcast and say, as I mentioned to him while we were speaking, that he's my brother from another mother. But he's a guy that ever since I've had him on Into the Necrosphere, I genuinely have developed a really great friendship with him. And, you know, he's somebody I regard as part of the inner circle. So, as always, a pleasure having him on the show. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Make sure if you're not showing Trivax any love, you change that. They're on Bandcamp. Their Bandcamp link will be in the description to the podcast, as always. And if you end up buying yourself any Trivax music, you let Shayan and the gang know who it was who sent you. He spoke about it as well during that interview. You may have picked it up, but I have footage for a mini documentary that I want to do on Trivax. That I will get round to finishing up at some point. But for now, though, hope you're satisfied. You had 2 hours of just absolute no-holds-barred goodness from start to finish. And speaking of which, it's time for the Unsanctioned Filth segment of the podcast. This week, we are going to be spotlighting a band out of Poland, Primitiae Dormientium. I had one of the members of Primitiae Dormientium reach out to me to tell me to check out their album, The Flame Vessel, which I did absolutely loved. Bizarrely enough, this has been released independently, which, again, much like the Furor that I played a couple of weeks ago and many of the other bands I feature on the Unsanctioned Filth segment, I just cannot believe that record labels have been sleeping on this, but you tell me whether or not you agree. From their 2025 masterpiece, The Flame Vessel, this is the title track, and the band Primitiae Dormientium. Primitiae Dormientium featured on the Unsanctioned Filth Spotlight this week. You just heard the title track off their 2025 release, The Flame Vessel. As I said, inexplicable to me how this band hasn't been signed yet, but you make sure you check out that album. They also have another one out called The Ash Chalice, and that was released on Putrid Cult. So, yeah, definitely a band worth paying attention to. Yet another in a long line of brilliant bands to come out of Poland. And a reminder, if you are checking out the podcast for the first time and you're in an unsigned band, hit me up through the contact page on intothenecrosphere.com. And if you want me to feature your music, or at the very least you want me to listen to it, drop me a note. I'll give it a whirl, and if I like it, I'll feature it on the show. Still a lot of good things to come, including the weekly news rant and the swirly of the week. But before that, just reminding you to follow all my fellow horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse. We've got Horrorwolf 666 on a Monday. We've got a double shot of Iblis Manifestations featuring this week's guest, plus Everything Went Black with Mike Hill on a Wednesday. We've got Necromaniacs and Soul Knocks on a Thursday. And then we've got another installment of Soul Knocks coming your way on a Sunday. And that, my friends, covers your week from end to end with the very highest and best quality entertainment that you will find anywhere. I mentioned intothenecrosphere.com. Head there for show playlists. You can check out all the show links, and all of my fellow horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse are on there as well. Plus, I will have all the Unsanctioned Filth bands housed in my Unsanctioned Filth Hall of Fame on that website forevermore. Done by the great Centelia. If you're after a new website, she is absolutely superb. I'm not paid to say that. She's not giving me any discount, but I worked with her for this website, and she was just absolutely top-notch. So figured I'd throw that one your way as well. Right now, my friends, if you're the kind of sniveling wimp who uses the word insufferable to describe somebody who doesn't like your pathetic, low-testosterone, AI slop black metal project, then the next hour is going to hurt your feelings tremendously, in which case it's time for you to hit the bricks, because this is my weekly news rant.
A roundabout for judgment. And hang them where the world can see.
All right, my friends, as always, we are going to kick off on metalstorm.net, the finest metal news website in all the land. And before we dive into the first headline that is grabbing my attention, I just wanted to talk very quickly about the change up in format this week. I'm going to do this for the next probably 4 to 6 weeks. There's a couple of reasons for it. First of all, what I've noticed looking at the analytics on YouTube and Spotify is that there is a definite dip from the intro, into the interview, which means huge number of people, and I would probably take a guess and say a lot of new people to the podcast aren't watching it anyway. So, if people aren't watching it anyway, it's kind of no point doing it. It also potentially hurts the reach of the episode. And again, like I said, it's not that I'm interested in hundreds of thousands of views, but what I am interested in is doing something that people actually get value out of. And I'm not going to be so precious about the sound of my own voice and the look of my own handsome face that I'm going to keep something in that is potentially redundant. So I'm doing it as an experiment. Frankly, it's a little easier for me to do the episodes without that intro as well. Like on a night like tonight, it's Sunday evening, it's 7:20 at night. I have to be up at 5 a.m. tomorrow morning, and I'm not complaining. But what I'm saying is the reality of day job, family commitments. I had my daughter here this weekend, all that sort of stuff. It adds up, and sometimes it's just easier to get through everything if there's less for me to add in from an editing perspective. So bear with me. If you like the new format, whether you're indifferent to it or whether you hate it, drop me a line in the comments. Tell me what you think. And in 4 to 6 weeks, if some of you guys say, or the majority of you guys say, man, we can't live without that intro, Jackie. If we don't hear you say what episode it is and what's coming up and, et cetera, we're just not going to listen to this whatsoever. We're going to go and listen to Banger TV, or, we're going to check out that Metal Hammer music channel. Actually, I don't even think Metal Hammer have a channel on YouTube. I might be wrong on that, but that's how little I give a shit. But we're gonna go and look at something else. If you don't bring it back straight away, of course I'll bring it back. But right now, like I said, I just want to see how it works with a slight revision. Don't worry, Never going to do the split that I have mooted before, where I'm going to have the news rant separate from the full episode. Even if I do a separate upload of the news rant, you will still get your full fat episode every Tuesday. So it'll be interview, the Unsanctioned Filth spotlight, and then the news rant. So if Tuesdays are what you look forward to, Tuesdays are what you're going to get. Maybe down the road, I'll start putting the news rant up on a Friday as well, just as a separate upload. But anyway, again, like I said, I welcome all feedback, good and bad. So let me know what you think of the changes, and we'll get straight into the first headline grabbing my attention, and that is that the Australian atmospheric black metal one-man band Midnight Odyssey have launched a brand new single entitled The Cold and Distant Oracle. It is being presented in multiple versions. So the gimmick here is that our man at Midnight Odyssey is presenting us with the actual single. It's entitled The Cold and Distant Oracle. And then he's got 4 additional versions that he offers us. One is a symphonic version, or they call it here a neoclassical version in the press notes. Track 3 and 4 are remixes by Death Comes Crawling, one apparently darker and one lighter. And then the final one is all 4 of those versions. So the main single and then all these remixes and all this malarkey playing together in one chaotic version. Very novel idea. Can't recall if there's anybody that did anything like that. I know Neurosis did something with, I can't remember if it was A Sun That Never Sets, but they did have this thing where they did like this ambient track that was supposed to go alongside the album. And if you played the 2 side by side, they sync together perfectly. I can't recall if there's been a black metal band that's done something as wild. But anyway, kudos to Midnight Odyssey for trying something a little different. Let's hear whether the music cuts the mustard. So the first comment that I would make about this track is it would have been infinitely better had disparted the man behind Midnight Odyssey, had he been just a little more creative, maybe just a little more varied with the programming of the drums in that section that we just heard now. So that main section where the keyboard kind of leads the melody, and it's kind of one of the main riffs of the song. The drumming there just sounds really tepid. And it's a shame because the rest of the song is actually pretty decent. When his vocals kick in, it's a really good, obviously very heavily Emperor influenced black metal, atmospheric black metal song. but it is let down by that one little burst of just really substandard drum programming. I don't know whether he did that intentionally, whether it's supposed to create some sort of contrast between the drums getting a little more complex as the song picks up and the vocals kick in, or whether he wanted the drums to be deliberately simple so that the keyboard could shine through. But either way, as I said, it's a damp squib on an otherwise decent attempt. And like I said, with the different versions of the single, a pretty novel idea. So it's not going to quite get a thumbs down, or even worse, a brown down. But it is going to, I mean, it's not going to get a top notch. Not going to get a thumbs up either. Okay, moving swiftly along. The one I know that many of you are very keen to hear my thoughts on, and I'm very keen to share my thoughts. At the Gates deliver a new single. To celebrate Thomas Lindbergh's legacy, At the Gates will release their final studio album with him on vocals, entitled The Ghost of a Future Dead. It comes out on the 24th of April 2026 via Century Media Records. The first single, The Fever Mask, is available for streaming together with an official music video. The band has stated that The Fever Mask was one of the final songs written for the album. It quickly stood out as the natural choice for the opening track and first single, and it perfectly captures the essence of At the Gates, blending raw energy, strong melody, and beautiful lyrics by Thomas.
Welcome to the video shoot for At the Gates.
So let's start with the obvious. There is an emotional weight to the song that hits you on several levels. First of all, the realization that the vocal track that you're hearing there was recorded just one day before Thomas Lindbergh underwent surgery for an adenoid cystic carcinoma. I mean, that's actually unbelievable that he was probably at that point so ill, but still delivered such an absolutely sterling performance. I mean, that is not. I think people probably don't see just how absolutely, well, a lot of people, I should say, will not see how monumental that is. So the emotional weight hits you there. It hits you, in the sense that obviously we know this is the final recording that he ever did, the final recording with At the Gates, and potentially the end of the band. Now, if the band decide to continue, this is probably a side conversation, a sidebar, but having reflected a lot on what I said about Nevermore last week and having had a few exchanges with people, actually, if At the Gates wanted to continue, they absolutely have the right to continue. Because for a lot of bands that have operated at a certain level where they've toured a lot, but they've never been mainstream popular, I don't think people realize just how much personal and sacrifice, financial sacrifice has come with that. Men that do that, and this actually includes the guys in Nevermore, they have not had the opportunity to build up a particularly lucrative career, and by extension, they've not had an opportunity to build up a nest egg for them to retire on comfortably. We're going to see a control group of the first generation of extreme metal musicians reach that age where they're no longer going to be able to perform. And I think we're going to read some pretty tragic stories when that happens. So that's a side note from my perspective. Like I said, if they want to continue At the Gates, I know there's conversations about them doing a couple of shows in tribute to Thomas. Absolutely, I will never say anything bad about it, and I actually backtrack on some of the more harsh, critical comments I made about Nevermore as well. I will never love Nevermore without Worrell as much as I love Nevermore with Worrell, but it's on me to put my hands up when I've been wrong about something, and I think I was wrong about that. I think I was wrong to be as harsh about it as I was initially. Now, anyway, back to the song. For me, as an At the Gates fan, I have been possibly one of the few people that have been a real die-hard fan of the post-comeback records. Speak, of course, of At War with Reality, To Drink from the Night Itself. I was even a fan of The Nightmare of Being, which for a lot of people was very experimental, but you can go all the way back to 2021 when it came out. I spoke about it on the record, and I liked it then. Hearing that, this new track is not as experimental as anything you would have heard off The Nightmare of Being, but it is definitely way back to At War with Reality. The melody, a little bit of darkness hitting some of that melody, a little bit of a tip back to Slaughter of the Soul. Nice and aggressive, nicely played. If you're a At the Gates hater or a particularly vociferous critic of At the Gates, probably there's plenty for you to look at there and go, well, they're not doing anything new. They're not doing anything I haven't heard before, but they're doing At the Gates as I've liked them. So from my perspective, that makes the song great. And it definitely earns a top notch for me. Also, kudos to the band. I think that the music video is done in a very tasteful, very loving way. And I suspect the rest of the album's going to sound like that too. So top notch for me. If you're not a At the Gates fan, probably not a lot for you to get excited about here. But if you are, as I have been, then I think this is a fitting final chapter in an incredible career. And, closing off an incredible legacy of a man who was not only a great dude, but a great singer, very influential, and he will never be forgotten. Okay, I put out over the weekend a request for some questions from the Legion, and you all responded in fine style. I actually potentially have more than I am going to get through on a single news rant, so I might be holding a couple of them for next week. But jumping straight into the responses. Somebody named Valenotti responded, not with a question, by saying, please invite Oli from Territor Possessions for an interview. Oli from Territor Possessions, you're officially invited. Anyone who sees this, who knows him, or if Oli himself is watching this, you're welcome on into the Necrosphere anytime you want to be. I love your label. I think you put out superb music. And you, of course, have a home on Into the Necrosphere right in your own Mean Street Studios whenever you want it. Courtney Stark Imagery is asked, what are some of the things you'd like to see more of and also less of in the black metal metal scene? Now, just one quick note on Courtney Stark. Checked out her Instagram page, and she does some really, really good photos. So if you're after a photographer to capture the moment and you're putting on a show in Australia where she's based, you definitely want to hit her up. She does some great work. So kudos to her in that regard. As far as the question is concerned, let's start with what I want to see less of. Number one, I want to see far less of the moral policing that goes on in this scene, and that probably won't come as any surprise to anybody. They make for some really funny content because most of the people that engage in this kind of thing are so clueless and so stupid and so full of themselves and so entitled. And they believe that they are so intellectually superior to everybody. Really, with that kind of cluelessness, how can you not be mining for comedy gold? I mean, Is It Sketch could basically ensure that I have swirlies of the week from now until I turn 66. So, but on a more kind of, I guess, more down to earth, more serious note, that grandstanding and that moralizing, one, as I've said many times before, it's totally antithetical to the spirit of extreme music. I'm not saying you should be okay with, a band flying the old Swazis on stage, or, giving popping off a couple of Romans midway through a song. But at the same time, I would also ask, as I did before, when we were talking about, what's his face? Was that fucking, I can't even remember the name of the Metal Threat. When we were talking about Metal Threat last year, if people are going to be into that kind of stuff, they're going to be into that whether you cancel every single Argus Lent show from year to the end of human existence or not. If they hold those beliefs, they're going to hold those beliefs regardless of what you say to them. So make decisions for yourself, police your own life, and stay out of other people's business. That's one of the things I would like to see a lot less of in the metal scene. And frankly, if you're so fragile and so sensitive that you cannot abide by somebody disagreeing with you on something, or singing about something that you disagree with, this is not the scene for you. And I do believe that for a lot of those people, they won't be in the scene in 3-4 years' time from now. They are tourists, travelers. They'll be gone. They'll be moved on to the next thing. Unfortunately, there's a whole, gaggle of crotch spawn ready to take their place. Wayward souls who can't befriend anybody else. They come to the metal scene and they realize we're a pretty accepting bunch. But yeah, anyway, that's kind of the main thing. What would I like to see more of? Nothing really. I think the metal scene, and the black metal scene especially, is in very good health at the moment. And some will agree, some will disagree. But with the exception of what I just spoke about now, if you think about the quality of music being released, you've got tons of great labels, you've got tons of great bands, young and legacy bands. Many of those legacy bands are still putting out absolute tier one work. A lot of the newer bands putting out stuff that's really exciting, pushing the genre forward, retaining the spirit of rebelliousness from particularly the second wave. The labels, festivals, podcasts like this one, you've got a very healthy ecosystem for getting the word out, for getting bands to, be able to get their names out, for the cream to rise to the top. So I can't really honestly think of anything I'd like to see more of. I just hope that the scene continues to stay as healthy and vibrant as it has been. I think with the inclusion of things like Amp Wall, and even more coming from the scene, I have no reason to believe that it won't continue to stay healthy for a very long time to come. I don't ever want to see the style of music experience a degree of mainstream success that equals something like Slipknot. I mean, am I going to start hating the music when we get to that point? No, but as soon as that level of money and that level of fame enter a band, I don't believe that you can really be truly angry and hateful and all those things that we like hearing in this music if you're driving around in a Ferrari, or if you're you're living this comfortable life where you've got this infrastructure around you where everybody tells you how great you are all the time. I just don't. I don't begrudge anybody any success, and those that do achieve success on their own terms. I mean, even bands I don't really like Behemoth, I still have to tip my hat to Nergal. He has achieved success on his own terms. That is commendable, especially in this day and age. But, there's also a reason why I think that early Behemoth is magnificent, but newer Behemoth just lacks the gut punch that I used to enjoy when from an album like Demigod. Anyway, let's move on. Non Est Deus stream a new track entitled Forgive Me. Now, Non Est Deus, for those that don't know, is headed up by Noise from Kanonenfieber. In the wake of their upcoming full-length release, it says here, the full-length release is called Blessings and Curses. due out on April the 3rd through Noisebringer Records. Black metalers Non Est Deus offer in listening a brand new track called Forgive Me. Let's hear what this one sounds like. Just about the only thing that I like about that song are the vocals. The rest I really could I mean I could take with not I could be perfectly happy if I never had to hear ever again. It's not the most deplorable thing that I've ever heard, but it's kind of like Canon and Fever in the sense that it deploys, and no surprise given who's responsible for it, but it deploys the same formulaic by the numbers style of songwriting that generally speaking doesn't really do anything for me. Bands like Amon Amarth that kind of it feels to me like they pretend to play heavy, but they stick to that verse chorus structure, guitar solo, bridge, and then back to the same thing. It has its roots, obviously. I mean, we know where it has its roots. It's classic heavy metal, bands like classic heavy metal, hard rock, etc. But as I said, I've always found it incredibly boring when extreme metal bands do that. It's fine for a Paradise Lost or somebody like that. A lot of bands that I like also deploy that same, relatively straightforward, basic songwriting structure. But when it comes to extreme music, I'm just after something different. With this one as well, the riff sounds like a riff I've heard 1,000 times before. The lyrics are absolutely dreadful. They look and read and sound as they get delivered like they were written by AI. Really, as I said, the vocals are the only thing that to me have any real power or impact in the song. I think if you're a Canon and Fever fan, definitely you're going to dig it, but not for me. And as I said last week, Canon and Fever are a band I'm growing increasingly indifferent to, much like the old World War I and World War II song subject matter. Next up, we have got Extinction A.D. They have inked a deal with M Theory Audio. M Theory Audio still struggling to make up lost ground after the embarrassment of signing Chris Adler's firstborn. They say M Theory Audio is thrilled to announce the signing of Long Island metal force Extinction A.D. To kick off this new chapter, the band present their fierce new single entitled Dead Man Running. I like this very much. And I'm not really sure what it is about it that I like so much. There's something about the way that it's executed that reminds me a little of a band that Jeremy Wagner used to be in. So Jeremy Wagner, of course, of Broken Hope, he used to be in a band called Lupara that he started back in 2003. They put out one album called Lupara, but on their demo that he gave me back when I first met him, the demo was called The Promo. I think I still have the CD lying here somewhere as well. There was something about the tracks on that, and I've listened to that promo a lot, that remind me a little bit of this. Again, nothing that we haven't heard before, but great execution. I think that the vocals sound really pissed off. Rick Jimenez is throwing around those vocal noises, those uhs, with real conviction. That always gets you bonus points when it comes to old Jackson. That main guitar riff that you have kind of running throughout the song, I think that's more infectious than a case of crabs. The drums sound great. And I think the variation in tempo, the breaks, etc., I think that works as well. So as far as a thrash hardcore crossover, I think this gets a thumbs up for sure. It's not as great as Fugitive. There's going to be, you're going to have to do something really special to impress me as much as that band has done, particularly when it comes to newer thrash. But from my perspective, I like this. If you don't know this band and you want to check out their back catalog, and I'm going to do that myself, which is why I'm mentioning it. They put out a record called Faith Killer in 2015. They put out another one called Decimation Treaty in 2018. And they put out one called Culture of Violence in 2022. And then finally To the Detested, which is their best reviewed record on Metal Archives. That came out in 2024. So maybe worth checking out. I'll certainly be keeping my eyes peeled and my ears to the ground for when this full-length album comes out. And also, kudos to M Theory Audio, because I was joking about the Firstborn signing earlier, but they did sign Hecate Enthroned, and they put out that new Hecate Enthroned single. They've done a great job promoting it as well. I think right now that single is on something insane like 250,000 views, which is wild for a black metal band. Okay, back to the questions. Razor Eater Metal, friend of the show, long-serving member of the Legion, asks me, what are your top 5 favorite albums of all time? I go by the old rule of whatever pops in my head first is my favorite. Number 1, Akakaka Karenzen, greatest album of all time. Number 2, Paradise Lost, Icon. Could be a variety of different Paradise Lost records based on my mood at the time, but that's what I would go for. Third record, Dear Side, Dear Side. Wearing the t-shirt right now, the greatest death metal album that has ever been produced. An absolute masterpiece. Number 4, a more recent record, The Antichrist Imperium Volume 3, Satan in His Original Glory. Presumably the final Antichrist Imperium album that we're going to hear, but I think the best and the perfect way, if they were going to end that project, the perfect way to end that project. Just utter perfection from start to finish. And then the fifth album, it's always difficult. It's harder to decide on the number 5 than it is to make up your mind on numbers 1 through 4. For number 5, again, just going off what comes off the top of my head, probably De Mysteries Dom Satanas by Mayhem. I'm sure that'll change if you ask me the same question in a month from now. But right now, based on how much I'm enjoying Mayhem just as a band generally, De Mysteries Dom Satanas by Mayhem. Leonid Melnikov has asked, why is Sleep Token so huge? I think Sleep Token are huge because there's a lot of people who are into them that are relatively new to metal, for whom their music is reasonably palatable, because I mean it's pretty mainstream stuff. So it's easy to get into for somebody who's not used to something that is particularly abrasive. And because it's easy to get into, and they also, they will never have grown up or been into bands like Maguire or, bands that kind of have that same, I mean, not the same theatrics, but, you know what I mean? There's the theatrics, the masks and all that sort of stuff. So for them, that's a novelty as well. They're probably a generation after the original maggots, the little turds that were into Slipknot. So I think that's why I think it's this generation's Slipknot. I think that's partly why they're popular. It's this generation's Slipknot. It's very heavily produced and easy to get into for somebody who's not into not really been into metal for a long time. So yeah, they can hear that and they can go, yeah, I like this energy and I'm going to get into it. Me personally, I think it's an absolutely fucking atrocious band. Moving swiftly along to some more music, we've got Resurrected. Brutal death metal machine Resurrected has released a Luis Arruda created lyric video for Forever Damned, the newest preview tune from their upcoming full-length offering, Perpetual. That is pretty enjoyable. Not again, nothing that you haven't heard before. Nothing that sounds like it was written and recorded in 2025 or 2026. I mean, the band have been going for quite a while, since Metal Archives says since 1993. But the song works because it's executed really well. It's taking a tried and tested blueprint, and it's giving it a great vocalist in Christopher Meaves. I think that's how you pronounce his surname. I mean, he sounds pissed off as all hell. Dennis Teal, their drummer, doing a great job on the old skins. And then you've got entertaining. I was going to say reasonably ordinary, but they're not. They are reasonably ordinary, but they're entertaining riffing that is delivered by people that are clearly massively into what they do. So proof that, you can get a band like this. They can do something that is entirely unoriginal, but they can still be enjoyable. Now, again, are they going to stop me from listening to Dying Fetus, or am I going to cast aside that first Deicide album for a few days, just focus on listening to the upcoming Resurrected record? Probably not. But if you've had your fill of every single brutal death metal release under the sun and you go, I am absolutely lost for what to listen to next, you could do a lot worse than checking out these guys. And like I said, I think that that vocalist in particular sounds superb. Speaking of vocalists, we've got Arch Enemy this week introducing their new vocalist. Her name is Lauren Hart. I am not going to bother listening to that song because, frankly, Arch Enemy is never going to be a band that I like. So there's no point in me even paying any sort of attention to it. You know what I'm going to say. I have seen that there's an awful lot of Arch Enemy fans that are incredibly excited about it, much as there are a load of Sun fans that are probably creaming their little shorts over the new single Butcher's Guns. I'm not going to lie to you. That has never, ever been a band I've enjoyed. I don't think I have ever heard a single minute of a Sun song that I have not thought was completely pointless. And please tell me in the comments if I'm wrong. Tell me if there's something that I'm missing. Tell me if there's a song I absolutely must listen to, or an album I absolutely should check out. Please don't say it's great for, when you drop some acid or you smoke a bowl. None of that shit appeals to me. But I've tried listening to it because it's very highly acclaimed by an awful lot of people, including a lot of people whose opinions I take very seriously. But for me, absolute drivel. I'm not going to bother with that Sol Negre song either, but I do want to check this out. New Exodus track. And boy, golly gee, did this get a lot of hate on my social media circles. It says here, Exodus are streaming a music video for Goliath, the new single and title track of their oncoming long player due out on March the 20th. The clip was directed by Tony Aguilera and Jim Louveau. The band comment on the new single: Goliath may quite possibly be the heaviest thing we've ever done, certainly the slowest song in our catalog, as close to doom metal as Exodus can get. Just pure evil, as sinister as it gets, featuring our friend Katie Jacoby, who laid down 18 tracks of strings in the middle harmony section, making the song go from pure horror to a thing of beauty. Right there is where that song falls apart completely. Wasn't bad, the opening part. Now, I can see people that are just absolute diehard Exodus fans and live for the faster stuff. They'll have heard that opening 2 minutes and they would have thought, this is too slow. When's it going to get to the point? But I can dig it. I like the fact that they've tried something a little bit different. They kind of attempted this on Exhibit B, which if you cast your mind back to that record, you can check out Architect of Pain. There's a song called Nanking, I believe. There's elements of what you hear on this track on those songs. And there's, a few others where they've tried something a little bit different. But yeah, this is certainly by their admission and by what my ears are telling me, the slowest song that Exodus have ever recorded. But the trouble is they kind of start with, you can tell where they're going. They're looking for something dark, brooding. And I think for the most part, they actually succeed in the beginning, even though maybe they sort of riff on that one idea a little bit too long. But then this part that just came in now, where they're trying to, I don't know whether they're trying to make it sound epic, whether they're trying to throw in melody. God forbid, I dare not listen to what the strings sound like when they come in, but it sounds like they had an idea and they didn't know where to take it next. Kudos to them, and unfortunately I'm using that word kudos too many times tonight, but I'm just going to say, well done to them for trying something different, especially for a band, this long in the tooth. But better luck next time, guys. I don't know what else to say. That just doesn't hit the mark. Definitely not for a band of this level of experience and talent. So, all right, let's get straight into another song. I'm not going to give that one a brown down. It definitely gets a thumbs down. Abhorrent Guitars has a question. Thoughts on the upcoming Bill Shatner metal album, and will he be on the pod? Once again, Bill Shatner is welcome to be on this podcast anytime he wants to be. I did read about the album, and he's got a pretty crazy lineup on the record. He's got Zach Wilde, Henry Rollins is going to be on there. You got Richie Blackmore, Wayne Kramer, Edgar Froese, I think, from Tangerine Dream. And he's doing covers of Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, and Iron Maiden alongside original material. I mean, this is, to me, kind of like, it'll be better, no doubt, but kind of like Pat Boone sings the hits. There's a novelty value to it, and that's going to be about it. I doubt I will ever listen to any song beyond the 90-second mark, but good for him. The bloke is 94. I think he's 94 years old, which, considering he has the fucking energy and the health to do something like that, I would wish to be so lucky at the age of 94. The Kragers has asked, what are your top 5 Thomas Sowell quotes or books that changed or reinforced your beliefs? By Thomas Sowell, it's actually very hard to think of that off the top of my head. You caught me out. I would definitely say, when it comes to Thomas Sowell books, the best ones that I would suggest you check out if you're new to him, Basic Economics. That will teach you an awful lot about how the world actually works. Intellectuals and Society, that he brought out in 2009, a really great book. Black Rednecks and White Liberals is another excellent one. And then one of his earlier books, A Conflict of Visions, is very good as well. As far as quotes are concerned, my recall is not strong enough to remember the quotes off the top of my head. Here's one that I've just looked up now that I do really like. Politics allows people to vote for the impossible, which may be one reason why politicians are often more popular than economists, who keep reminding people that there is no free lunch and that there are no solutions, but only trade-offs. He has another one where he talks about how politicians are the only people that can get away with doing a terrible job and suffering absolutely no consequences for it, which is 100% correct. But if you like Thomas Sowell, or if you don't know Thomas Sowell, frankly, I would say check out those books that I just mentioned now. I mean, the man is an absolute national treasure. It's a shame that he never ran for the presidency. I know on one of the interviews that I saw that he did on the Hoover Institution channel, he was asked outright why he never ran for it. And he said, because it's a terrible job and he would hate to do it, which, I can respect as well. But yeah, there you go. Getting some questions from all fucking angles this week. Okay, Belphegor deliver a brand new single. Belphegor unveiling a brand new single and video for the song Scarlet Beast Leviathan. It was recorded at the studio Miss Machine Oberraum in Austria with Jake K and Michael Zeck's Church of Sound studio in Munich, Germany. Fucking usual long list of credits, but it's been a while since Belphegor have put something out. I know there was some chatter about this on the Horseman message that we've got going, the Horseman thread we have going on Facebook Messenger. So let's hear what Belphegor have gotten up to this time round. Another long-time Legion member asked me a question, and by the way, just to give him his due credit, his name is Kelu666, sergeant at arms in the Legion, really. He asked, you mentioned Uada's acoustic album sparking your interest enough to revisit their discography. Are there other bands you initially wrote off but rediscovered following a later release? And actually, Belphegor is one of those, which is why I bring up the question. I really enjoyed their previous record, The Devils, and that was enough for me to check out some of the earlier stuff. I don't know why they never really did very much for me, but Goat Reich, Flesh Cult, Bondage Goat Zombie, that sort of stuff. It at the time they were released, I just couldn't get into them. A lot of people I knew really loved them, but for me it didn't do anything. So I was fairly indifferent to the band for most of the 2010s when The Devils came out. Took me a couple of listens, but I did actually get into it, and it made me check out with a more positive ear some of their previous stuff. This new single I like very much as well. I now understand why there was a lot of chatter about it on the Horseman thread, and my brothers in the Horseman were certainly justified in what they had to say about it. Great atmosphere, great execution, cool riffing, excellent performances all round. Production, in case I haven't mentioned that yet, sounds pretty fucking meaty to me. So yeah, that gets a maybe even a top notch. I was gonna give it a thumbs up, and then I automatically upgraded it in my mind to a top notch. I like that very much. And just to answer the rest of that question, so another band who I had been relatively indifferent to, Watain. I really liked Cassus Luciferi, but for whatever reason, I fell off on Sworn to the Dark, and then I never paid any attention to them again after that until The Agony and Ecstasy of Watain came out, and I was very, very impressed by that record. Impressed enough that it changed my perspective of their back catalog entirely. And now where I previously I would barely have considered myself a Watain fan, I mean, I certainly consider myself one now. So killing two birds with one stone there, telling you what I think of the new Belphegor and telling you about bands that I've gone back and rediscovered. I think, let's see if there's any other music that we want to check out. We've got that new Gaerea single, but that's another one I'm giving a skip. I'm permanently done with that band. When I saw the other day that they were going to be going on tour with In Flames, again, I don't begrudge anybody the opportunity to play with a bigger band, but them going on tour with In Flames kind of tells you the audience they're going after, and it's no longer the audience that joined me in absolutely loving their first 3 records. I have, in the interest of full disclosure, I have listened to about 2 minutes of the new single, hated it. So absolutely no point in us listening to it yet. I will do one more question though, and then I think it's time for us to issue a bruising swirly of the week. Let's see. We got Grind Your Mind 77. He's asked me, what's your favorite UK hardcore band? I have a hard time picking between Stamping Ground and Knuckle Dust. I'd put Medulla Nocta and the much missed Murder One in that category. Also, that version of hardcore line dancing that happens at shows is for shitbags. 100% agree with you on that. My favorite UK hardcore band, absolutely without a doubt, no hesitation in picking them, Stamping Ground. How can you not? Anybody who's been to a Stamping Ground show knows exactly what I mean. When they launch into Officer Down or Behind the Light, everything, Dead from the Neck Down. I went to so many Stamping Ground shows back in the day, and those are some of my favorite memories of live shows in the UK, in London, that I will treasure those memories for the rest of my life. Some of the most violent, crazy, wild shows ever. And frankly, you didn't really see a lot of that stupid fucking, kung fu windmilling and all that crap at those shows, partly because they were usually so packed. Generally speaking, I think the people that went to those shows just wouldn't have abided by it. So yeah, Stamping Ground, best of the best as far as UK hardcore is concerned. Thank you very much for that question. As I said, I've got a couple more. I will get to those next week. First up, though, it's time. I can sense the toilet of punishment drawing closer, because it's time for the swirly of the week.
No. Oh, you like?
Now, friends, this week's swirly goes out to a singer that some of you may be familiar with. Hopefully, most of you won't. But he goes by the name Young Blood, and his fame was previously confined to TikTok algorithms, but particularly for 10-year-old girls. And then he lucked out and he got to sing at the final Black Sabbath concert last year. He did changes. A lot of people gushed about it. I myself was not convinced. My own personal view when it comes to Youngblood is that he basically looks like what would happen if Billie Eilish and Joe Scarborough had a baby, immediately abandoned it at Hot Topic. And his behavior over the years really tracks with that theory. I mean, amongst the many ridiculous things he said and done, one, he branded anybody who dislikes his music as a jealous hater suffering from blind negativity. Secondly, he built an entire career basically on just pathetic, entitled, manufactured middle-class pandering. One of his lyrics, as an example, "I was born in a messed up century. My favorite flavored sweets are raspberry amphetamines." So you kind of get the idea of the sort of IQ level that you're dealing with here. And basically, if you go through any of his songs, and partly I know about this because for a brief period, I'm ashamed to say my daughter was into Youngblood. That's not the case anymore. But, she showed me some of his music videos and his songs. And I mean, basically, it reads like a PowerPoint presentation entitled "How to Pander to Woke Pathetic Idiots." Now, all of this goes some way towards explaining why this little miscreant recently took to Instagram to offer a groveling apology for the unpardonable crime of posing for a photo with Rammstein's Till Lindemann. He claims, which I absolutely don't buy, that he had no idea about the sexual misconduct allegations that were leveled at Till back in 2023. And he posted the following: I had no idea. Obviously, at the minute, I'm meeting a lot of people every day without fully knowing who they are or what they're about. And I can assure you, if I knew about any allegations, it would have been a completely different story. What would he have done? Pushed Till away and said, stay away from me, German man. I won't pose for a photo with you. I won't. Anyway, he says, I can assure you it would have been a different story. You know what I stand for always. I'll be more aware of it in the future. Now, here's my problem with this. If the allegations were proven true and Till was arrested, then, I'd pat the young man on the back. Obviously, he'd flinch if you do that and say, please don't hurt me, sir. But I'd pat him on the back. I'd say, son, this is one of the first sensible things that you've ever done in your entire life. But here's the thing. Till wasn't found guilty. As a matter of fact, the German police investigated him and they cleared him on the basis, and I think this is particularly important to note, insufficient suspicion of a crime, which means there wasn't even enough evidence or testimony to justify investigating the matter, let alone there being enough evidence to actually arrest him. So the translation to that, from my perspective, is regardless of whatever personal opinion you have about Till Lindemann, it was a bullshit claim. There's a YouTuber named, I think her name is Colonel Kurtz. She did a deep dive into this, revealed cell phone footage, basically, of the person that accused Till of being drunk, disorderly at the show, and, potentially she herself being or making unwanted sexual advances to some of the security. And, again, from my perspective, if you are guilty of sexual assault, personally, I think you should be tossed into the fucking spinning blades of a ride-on lawnmower. But we also can't live in a world where this precedent is set that if you've been accused of anything, whether or not you've been found guilty of it, we need to, indict that person from here on out. Anybody who's ever appeared on a photo or an album or on stage with that person needs to be condemned forevermore and apologize to everybody. That is fucking ridiculous. If that were the case, then I may as well just come out right now and admit that Youngblood offered me $10 so that he can play with my winky. Now, you may say, when did this happen, Jackie? I can't remember. I must have been too drunk at the time. Where did it happen? Oh, London, or maybe Berlin. I'm too traumatized to remember clearly, but what I do know is that every single person who enjoys a Youngblood song or attends a Youngblood concert has to apologize to me personally from now on. That is how fucking ridiculous it is. The irony about this is this comes from a lot of the same people who believe that the police need to be defunded and that prisons should be shut. So, again, what are we left with here? Mob justice? So that is a long way of saying that Youngblood is an absolute turd and he needs to spring to attention for, I think we're not going to go with a double Melvin. I think considering the fact that, from my understanding, this photo was taken in Australia, we're going to give him the old kangaroo wedgie, the old bouncing up and down wedgie, and then we're dipping his head down into the toilet of justice. And that, my friends, is the swirly of the week. And that also brings us to the end of Into the Necrosphere, episode 306. See, even if you didn't know, I still managed to remind you at the end of the episode that it was episode 306. I hope you guys have enjoyed that. I will be back next week. My guest is none other than the Magus, formerly of Thou Art Lord and Necromantia. Loads of very, very interesting topics explored in that conversation. And of course, we'll have the news rant, we'll have Unsanctioned Filth, and all the usual goodness that you know and love about Into the Necrosphere. So if you stuck around until the very end, my thanks. My appreciation, whatever it is that you are doing, my friends, and wherever it is that you are going, stay safe, stay healthy. And just before I go, I got a lot of feedback saying people really like when I talk about my favorite releases or the releases that I'm into. So let me tell you this, that new Mesotheist album, let me just remind myself what it's called. But that, my friends, is absolutely fucking magnificent. In my view, as was the case with the new Mayhem album, unquestionably a album of the year contender. Top 3 contender, without a doubt. The album is called The Pinter. And as we were talking about Territorial Possessions earlier, it's on Territorial Possessions. Masterpiece. You're about to find out just how big of a masterpiece if you've not listened to it yet, because I'm going to play a track called Blinded and Revealed. Right as I say, I'll see you bad motherfuckers again next week.